Welcome to Calming Bedtime Journeys channel. Tonight we step through the gates of a medieval castle in the winter of 1105, just as a freezing blizzard closes over the surrounding countryside. What happens when snow buries every road? The wind rattles every shutter, and hundreds of people must depend upon one stone fortress. Does a castle remain warm and secure, or does it become a cold, crowded trap behind its towers and battlements? You will discover a world of smoky halls, damp clothing, restless animals, nervous servants, guarded storerooms, and fires that must not be allowed to die. The walls may look powerful from the valley below, but winter has ways of finding every weakness. It slips beneath doors, settles into bedding, freezes water, and turns simple daily tasks into exhausting struggles. So, before you settle into the story, take a second to like the video and hit subscribe, and as the snow begins to fall, leave a comment telling us your location and your local time. Now, dim the lights, and imagine that you are standing on a narrow road beneath a darkening sky. The year is 1105, although nobody around you would describe it so neatly. Most people measure time by royal reigns, saints' days, harvests, and family memories. They might say this winter came during the rule of King Henry, or 3 winters after the old mill burned. Ahead of you, a castle rises above a ridge of frozen earth. Its stone walls appear pale beneath the first gathering snow, while wooden roofs huddle behind the battlements. The central tower stands above everything, square, heavy, and deeply reassuring from a distance. You hear the wind first. It moves through the bare branches with a low, steady moan. Loose snow skitters over the road and gathers against your boots. Your cloak is thick wool, yet dampness has already reached the cloth beneath it. The cold feels personal. It finds your fingers inside their rough coverings and presses against your cheeks. Each breath stings slightly, carrying the smell of wet wool, wood smoke, horse sweat, and frozen mud. Several travellers move beside you toward the gate. A woman carries a covered basket against her chest. 2 men guide a small cart loaded with sacks, firewood, and a barrel wrapped in rope. A boy leads a stubborn goat that clearly objects to both the weather and the journey. Nobody lingers outside. The castle gatehouse stands open, though guards watch everyone approaching. In 1105, many castles across England and Normandy are changing from timber strongholds into more permanent stone fortifications. Some remain partly wooden, because rebuilding is expensive and painfully slow. This particular castle contains both materials. Its outer wall is stone in several sections, while inner workshops and shelters use timber, clay, and thatch. The mixture creates strength, but also danger, especially when sparks leap from overcrowded hearths. You reach the drawbridge as snow thickens around you. Beneath the wooden planks lies a ditch, not necessarily filled with water, despite what later stories often suggest. Here, the defensive trench holds mud, discarded branches, and patches of ice. Your footsteps sound hollow above the gate. A guard leans beneath a covered opening. His hood is stiff with frost, and a short spear rests against the wall beside him. He studies the cart, then calls down to another man standing near the entrance. The exchange is brief. Supplies are expected inside the gateway. The air changes immediately. The walls block some of the wind. Though cold stone seems to breathe its own chill, torchlight flickers across damp surfaces, and melted snow drips from cloaks onto the packed earth. The courtyard beyond is busier than you expected. People hurry in several directions, preparing for the storm before darkness arrives. Stable hands lead horses beneath shelter. Servants carry bundles of split wood toward covered storage. A cook's assistant struggles with a basket of onions while another person rolls a small cask toward the kitchens. Nothing feels graceful. Medieval castles are often remembered through tournaments, feasts, banners, and noble ceremonies. Yet most castle life consists of labour, repair, storage, cooking, cleaning, guarding, carrying, and waiting during winter. These tasks become heavier. Snow gathers on roof beams and wooden stairs, water freezes inside shallow containers, doors swell from dampness, then become difficult to close. Smoke refuses to rise properly when the air presses low over the fortress. A bell rings somewhere inside the walls. Its sound is dull and solemn beneath the thickening snowfall. People glance upward, judging how much daylight remains. Winter afternoons end quickly, and every unfinished task becomes harder once darkness covers the courtyard. You step aside as 3 sheep are driven past. Their wool is wet along the surface, and their hooves leave dark marks in the snow. They may be brought inside the outer enclosure for protection, though not necessarily into comfortable shelter. Animals matter enormously here. A warhorse's wealth, transport, military power, and social status combined. Sheep provide wool, hides, milk in some regions, and eventually meat. Chickens produce eggs when conditions allow, while dogs guard doors, chase vermin, and sleep close to warmth. One curious tradition claims that some medieval households kept unusual animals as symbols of prestige, including apes, bears, and exotic birds. Such creatures belonged mostly to wealthy courts, not ordinary castles, and their winter care could become absurdly difficult. Your castle appears more practical. Near the stable wall, a small dog has discovered a patch of warmth beside a pile of fresh manure. It curls itself tightly, ignoring the dignity expected from a castle guardian. The wind strengthens again. Snow sweeps over the battlements and falls into the courtyard in spiraling sheets. A wooden shutter slams above you, followed by an irritated voice from inside. Someone closes it properly, and the sound stops. You look toward the great tower. This keep contains chambers for the lord's household, storage spaces, defensive rooms, and perhaps a chapel. Its exact arrangement depends upon the builder, the landscape, available money, and later alterations. Scholars continue to debate how consistently early 12th century castle rooms were used. A chamber labelled as private in one interpretation may have served several purposes during emergencies, ceremonies, or seasonal crowding. Rooms are flexible here during a blizzard. Privacy becomes less important than heat. People sleep closer together, work beside the same fires, and gather wherever walls remain dry. Rank still matters, of course, because medieval society rarely forgets hierarchy. Even so, cold encourages unusual companionship. A servant may sleep near a noble chamber because she must tend the fire. Guards may rest inside passages normally kept clear. Children may be moved from drafty rooms into crowded spaces near the hall. You cross the courtyard toward the main entrance. Snow crunches beneath your boots, though the ground below remains muddy where constant traffic has disturbed it. The smell of dung, smoke, damp straw and cooking broth hangs heavily in the air. It is not pleasant. It is also strangely comforting. These smells mean animals are sheltered, fires are burning, and food is being prepared in a winter storm. Survival has its own perfume, and elegance is not part of it. At the doorway, 2 servants shake snow from a heavy hanging cloth. Such textiles help reduce drafts, though they collect dust, smoke, moisture, and every odour produced by human life. You duck beneath the doorway. Warmth does not greet you immediately, instead. You enter a dim passage where stone walls hold the day's cold. A rushlight burns in a shallow holder, giving off weak illumination and a faint greasy smell. Farther inside, however, you hear voices. There is laughter, a barking dog, the scrape of benches, and the crackle of a large hearth. The great hall lies ahead, glowing with firelight and crowded movement. Before you reach it, you pause. Behind you, the outer doors begin to close. Men push against the heavy timber while the wind fights from the other side. Hinges groan, iron fittings strain, and snow blows through the narrowing gap. Then the doors meet. A wooden bar drops into place with a deep final sound for tonight. The castle is sealed. Outside, the road disappears beneath snow. Fields vanish, trees bend, and isolated cottages prepare for the same cold with far fewer protections. Inside, everyone listens briefly to the storm striking the walls. The fortress feels safe, yet safety depends upon firewood, food, discipline, cooperation, and luck. Stone walls alone cannot keep people warm, feed animals, heal illness, or prevent fear from spreading through crowded rooms. You continue toward the hall. Firelight grows brighter across the passage floor. Warm air carries the smell of roasted onions, spilled ale, wet leather, and smoke. People move beyond the doorway, each absorbed in some small duty. The blizzard has only begun, and within these walls, an entire winter world is drawing close around the flame. The first thing you notice after entering the great hall is not the warmth. It is the noise. Dozens of conversations blend into a steady murmur that rises and falls like distant waves upon a rocky shore. Wooden cups knock gently against long tables. Someone laughs after dropping a loaf onto the floor. A child whispers something that makes another child cover a smile before an older servant notices. Only after a few slow breaths do you become aware that the air is indeed warmer than outside. Not warm by modern expectations, simply warm enough that your fingers begin to lose their painful stiffness. The icy bite lingering inside your gloves gradually fades. Your shoulders relax beneath your heavy wool cloak as the heat from the enormous central hearth reaches you in gentle pulses. The hall is the heart of the castle. It is where meals are served. Announcements are made, visitors are welcomed, disputes are settled, and countless ordinary hours quietly unfold. During a fierce winter storm, it becomes even more important. Nearly everyone passes through it at some point during the day. Smoke hangs beneath the high timber roof. Some escapes through openings above, but not all of it. Medieval fireplaces, especially those inside great halls during the early 12th century, are efficient enough to keep people alive, yet far from perfect by modern standards. Your eyes sting slightly. The smell is unmistakable. Burning oak mixes with damp wool, melted snow, animal fat, fresh bread, beeswax candles, and the faint scent of dogs sleeping close to the fire. It is an aroma that settles into clothing, perhaps for weeks. You remove your gloves and hold your hands toward the flames. The heat reaches your palms first, then slowly spreads through your fingers, around you. Nearly everyone performs the same quiet ritual after returning from the freezing courtyard. Nobody rushes, fuel is valuable, but so is patience. Along the nearest wall, several benches are occupied by elderly retainers whose faces are deeply lined from decades of outdoor work. They speak softly while repairing leather straps with bone needles and waxed thread. Nearby, a young page carefully polishes a riding spur under the watchful eye of an older servant. Every movement has purpose. Castles rarely have idle moments, especially during winter. Even while storms rage outside, clothing must be mended, tools repaired, meals prepared, and supplies counted. A widespread historical understanding tells us that the Great Hall served as the primary communal living space in many medieval castles, rather than remaining isolated in private chambers. Much of daily life revolved around this shared room where people gathered for work, meals, and conversation. The arrangement also conserved heat. Instead of trying to warm dozens of individual rooms, people concentrated around a few reliable fires. You glance upward. The ceiling disappears into shadow where thick oak beams stretch across the hall. Their surfaces have darkened after years of absorbing smoke from countless winters. Small curls of soot drift lazily overhead before vanishing into the dimness. Nothing looks polished. Everything looks used. Heavy wooden tables display knife marks from thousands of meals. benches of rounded edges worn smooth by generations of occupants. Even the stone floor near the hearth has become slightly hollow, where countless boots have stood seeking warmth. History often leaves traces like these. Not dramatic, quiet. Across the hall, 2 servants spread fresh rushes over part of the floor, contrary to a common misconception. These rushes were not always left untouched until they became unbearable. In many households they were replaced regularly, though cleanliness naturally depended upon wealth, management, and available labour. The fresh reeds release a subtle, grassy fragrance. For a brief moment, they remind you that spring will eventually return. A cheerful dog wanders between the tables hoping for dropped scraps. His tail moves enthusiastically despite receiving little encouragement. One cook gently nudges him away with her foot before dropping a tiny crust behind her, without anyone seeming to notice. The dog understands immediately. He disappears beneath a bench. One curious detail survives in medieval accounts describing dogs becoming so familiar with great halls that visitors sometimes complained more about stepping around animals than people. Whether every castle tolerated this is uncertain, but several records certainly suggest canine companions enjoyed remarkable freedom indoors. The castle cat appears less interested in visitors. She sits near stacked grain sacks with complete confidence, observing every movement without the slightest urgency. Mice remain a constant threat to valuable food stores, making skilled hunters surprisingly welcome residents. Outside, the wind howls again. You hear it pressing against shutters with slow determination. Every so often, snow slips from the roof and lands with a muffled thump somewhere beyond the walls. The storm has strengthened. Inside, nobody panics. Experience teaches these people that winter cannot be defeated. It can only be endured with preparation, routine, and cooperation. Near the centre of the hall, several children gather around an elderly woman who is spinning wool using a simple drop spindle. Her hands move almost automatically while she tells a quiet story. The children listen with wide eyes, though one occasionally glances toward the roasting meat hanging above the fire. Hunger never wanders far, especially during winter. Food remains carefully measured because nobody knows exactly how long the roads will stay blocked. Snow may melt within days, or linger much longer. You notice several large barrels standing against the wall. Ale, unlike many modern assumptions. Weak ale often formed part of everyday life because clean drinking water was not consistently reliable everywhere. Brewing also helped preserve grain while producing a familiar daily beverage enjoyed by adults and children alike in varying strengths. The smell is pleasantly earthy. Beside the barrel stand sacks of oats, dried peas, onions, and coarse flour awaiting the kitchen's attention tomorrow morning. Every sack represents security. The castle steward certainly knows exactly how many remain. Some medieval financial records reveal astonishing attention to inventory. Household officials counted candles, salt, grain, cheese, fish, and even individual kitchen utensils because shortages during winter could quickly become serious. Exactly how detailed these records were in every castle remains uncertain. Researchers continue discussing how much variation existed between royal residences, noble households, and smaller regional fortresses, particularly during the early years of the 12th century when administrative practices differed considerably. Whatever the precise method, careful counting clearly mattered. Nothing here is wasted willingly. You walk toward one of the narrow windows. Its opening is deeply set within the thick stone wall. There is no broad glass pane offering a clear view. Instead, cold air slips through tiny gaps around wooden coverings and protective fabric. You can still see the courtyard. Snow now blankets everything in pale white. The tracks you followed earlier have almost disappeared beneath fresh snowfall. Stable roofs carry thick, growing layers. Guards crossing the yard lean forward against powerful gusts while pulling their cloaks tightly around themselves. You silently wish them a quick return indoors. A servant beside you notices your attention. Without speaking, he pushes a heavy wool hanging closer across the opening to reduce the draft. Even such a simple adjustment makes the nearby air feel slightly less hostile. Little improvements matter. They accumulate. One blocked draft, one extra log, one repaired blanket, one carefully stored sack of grain. Survival often depends less upon grand heroic actions than hundreds of sensible decisions repeated every day. A horn sounds outside, briefly. Several people glance toward the entrance before returning to their work. Perhaps another traveller has reached the gate before conditions worsen completely, or perhaps a patrol has returned. Either way. The hall absorbs newcomers with practiced efficiency. Wet cloaks are removed, hands approach the fire, boots leave melting snow upon the rushes, someone offers warm broth without needing lengthy conversation. Hospitality and necessity become close companions. You realize something quietly remarkable. Although everyone inside belongs to different ranks, performs different duties, and enjoys different privileges, every person now depends upon the same walls, the same fire, and the same roof. The blizzard ignores social status. The castle cannot. Hierarchy remains visible in seating arrangements, clothing quality, and expected responsibilities. Yet winter gently reminds everyone that even the Lord cannot command the snow to stop falling. The flames leap higher, fresh logs settle with a satisfying crack, orange light dances across polished cups, rough cloaks, weathered faces, and smoke-stained beams that have witnessed decades of similar evenings. Somewhere beyond these walls, wolves may wander frozen forests, travellers may search desperately for shelter, and distant villages may disappear beneath drifting snow. Inside, life continues, steadily, patiently. You find an empty place upon a long wooden bench. A steaming bowl is placed before you without ceremony. The broth carries the comforting fragrance of onions, herbs, barley, and slow-cooked meat. You wrap both hands around the bowl. The warmth rises toward your face. Outside, winter tightens its grip. Inside, the castle breathes together. You finish the last spoonful of warm broth just as a quiet change passes through the hall. Nobody announces it. Nobody strikes a bell. Yet almost everyone notices. Conversations soften. A few servants straighten their posture, and several people glance toward the raised platform at the far end of the room. The lord of the castle has entered with members of his household. Not through a grand display, but with the quiet confidence of someone who belongs there. He is wrapped in layers of wool trimmed with fur. His cloak carries traces of melting snow, suggesting he has recently inspected part of the fortress despite the worsening weather. Beside him walks his wife, equally protected against the cold, followed by 2 younger children and several trusted attendants. You quickly realize that noble life is far less effortless than many later stories suggest. Comfort certainly exists. Responsibility exists even more. The Lord cannot simply remain beside the fire while the storm grows stronger outside. Every hour brings another decision. Are the food stores sufficient? Have the animals been secured? Is enough firewood stacked beneath shelter? Have the guards rotated often enough to avoid frostbite? Has anyone failed to return before the gates were barred? Every answer matters. The hall itself reflects this balance between privilege and obligation. The high table stands upon a slightly raised platform. It gives the lord and his family a clear view of the room, while reminding everyone of the social order that shapes medieval life. Even during shared meals, hierarchy remains visible in where people sit, what they eat, and how they are served. Yet tonight the difference feels smaller than you expected. The storm has a curious way of reducing unnecessary ceremony. The lord removes his gloves and warms his hands over a nearby brazier before speaking quietly with the steward. A servant unrolls a narrow strip of parchment while another points toward the courtyard through a small opening in the wall. You cannot hear every word. You do not need to. Their expressions reveal enough. The weather has become the castle's greatest concern. Outside, snow continues falling with remarkable determination. What began as scattered flakes now forms thick white curtains drifting across the battlements, Visibility has fallen sharply. Anyone attempting to reach the castle tonight would struggle to find the road. You wonder about the nearby villagers. Many peasants lived in timber cottages with walls of wattle and daub rather than thick stone. Their homes provided shelter, but nothing approaching the protection offered by a fortified castle. During severe weather, some tenants might seek temporary refuge inside the outer defences if space and circumstances allowed. Exactly how often this happened remains uncertain. Some historians believe castles occasionally sheltered nearby people during extraordinary emergencies. Others argue that available space, food supplies, and military priorities limited such generosity more than romantic imagination suggests. The truth probably varied. Each lord ruled differently. Each winter brought different challenges. Your attention returns to the high table. Bread has already been placed before the lord's family. A roasted capon occupies the centre alongside cheese, onions, and small bowls of preserved fruit. The meal appears generous, though not extravagant by noble standards. Even important households must think ahead. Every chicken eaten today cannot lay eggs later. Every barrel opened now will not remain sealed until spring. The steward understands this better than almost anyone. He is one of the busiest figures in the castle, even if visitors rarely notice him. While warriors receive admiration and priests offer prayers, the steward quietly counts grain, inspects storage rooms, supervises servants, records supplies, and prepares for problems before they become disasters. His work rarely attracts songs. It keeps everyone alive. A young page approaches carrying a pitcher of ale with both hands. He cannot be more than 12 years old, yet he moves carefully, determined not to spill a single drop before reaching the high table. His concentration is admirable. Life inside a noble household often begins with service and observation. Pages learn manners, discipline, riding, and practical responsibilities long before becoming squires or assuming adult roles. Education here is not separated from daily life. It is woven into it, nearby. The lady of the castle speaks quietly with an older woman overseeing several younger servants. Their discussion appears calm but purposeful. Fresh blankets are needed for guest chambers. More candles must be prepared before night fully settles. Someone should check that warm stones are heated before being placed beneath bedding for elderly residents. These details may seem ordinary. They are anything but. Managing a castle requires hundreds of small decisions that rarely appear in heroic legends. The wind rattles the shutters again. This time the sound lasts several long moments before fading. Several children glance nervously toward the walls. One of the older servants smiles reassuringly. "The walls have heard worse," he says gently. Whether that is entirely true hardly matters. The children smile back. Comfort sometimes depends more upon confidence than certainty. You notice another difference between the noble household and everyone else. Privacy remains limited. The lord and lady possess separate chambers within the keep, but they are far from isolated. Servants enter to tend fires, bring meals, prepare clothing, deliver messages, and maintain furnishings throughout the day. Even those at the top of society rarely enjoy complete solitude. A surprising historical detail concerns medieval furniture. Many noble households owned fewer permanent furnishings than people expect. Chests served both as storage and seating. Tables could often be dismantled after meals. Valuable textiles, rather than expensive furniture, frequently represented some of the greatest displays of wealth. Richly woven wall hangings also served another purpose. They reduced drafts. Stone walls, impressive though they appeared, absorbed cold relentlessly. Hanging thick fabric against them created a slightly more comfortable environment, while adding colour to otherwise grey interiors. You imagine how much warmer the chamber must feel with wool tapestries lining the walls. Not warm, simply less unforgiving. The lord rises briefly from his seat and walks toward one of the windows overlooking the courtyard. A guard joins him, pointing toward the gatehouse before disappearing again into the passage for several quiet moments. The lord remains still, watching. Leadership during winter often consists of observation. He cannot control the weather, he can only respond wisely. A messenger arrives moments later, his boots leaving wet footprints across the floor. Snow clings to his cloak despite efforts to brush it away before entering. He bows respectfully. The conversation that follows is brief. A section of fencing near the livestock enclosure has collapsed beneath drifting snow. Repairs must wait until daylight unless conditions worsen dramatically. The Lord nods once. Additional guards are assigned to monitor the area through the night. No raised voices follow, no dramatic speeches. Competent administration usually sounds rather ordinary. The meal continues. You watch the noble family speaking quietly together while candles flicker across polished cups and carved wooden dishes. One child laughs softly after the castle dog settles beneath the high table, with complete confidence that scraps will eventually appear. Perhaps he is correct. No one seems eager to remove him. Outside, darkness has fully arrived. The windows now reflect the firelit hall more clearly than the storm beyond. Occasionally, a gust of snow sweeps past the narrow openings like pale smoke before disappearing into the night. Time feels slower. The rhythm of the castle has changed. Morning demanded preparation. Afternoon required labour. Evening invites careful planning. Before retiring, the steward consults once more with the lord. You notice them studying wax tablets and small parchment notes. Supplies discussed again. Firewood receives special attention. The blacksmith requests more charcoal. The stable master believes additional straw should be moved indoors before dawn. Every conversation circles back to survival. Not because fear dominates the castle, because experience does. These people have seen winters before, some easier, some much worse. They know storms often outlast optimism, yet they also know preparation rewards patience. As the great hall gradually quiets, servants begin carrying empty bowls toward the kitchens. Fresh logs are placed upon the central fire, sending another wave of welcome warmth through the room. The lord offers a final glance across the hall before leaving for the keep. His family follows. Their responsibilities will resume with sunrise, perhaps earlier. You remain seated beside the glowing hearth, listening to the crackle of oak logs and the distant voice of the blizzard pressing patiently against walls that have protected generations before you. Tonight, the castle sleeps beneath noble authority. Tomorrow, every decision will matter once again. Long before the first grey light reaches the snow-covered battlements, the servants are already awake. You hear them before you see them. A door opens somewhere beyond the hall, followed by the soft scrape of boots across stone. Someone carries a basket through the passage. Another person coughs quietly in the smoky air, then mutters about the cold while lifting a bundle of kindling. The castle is not truly asleep. It merely changes shifts. You rise from your place near the fading hearth and follow the first signs of movement into the dim passage. The air feels sharper away from the fire. Your breath forms a faint mist, and the floor chills your feet through thick leather soles. A young servant passes with a clay lamp. Its flame is small and yellow, trembling whenever the air stirs. She shields it carefully with one hand while balancing folded cloth over her other arm. There is no wasted light here. Candles require wax or tallow. Oil must be stored. Rushlights burn quickly and smell strongly. Every flame is useful, but every flame also consumes something valuable. The kitchens are already busy as you approach. Warmth and sound spill through the doorway. Iron pots knock against wooden tables. A knife chops steadily through onions. Someone stirs porridge while another worker feeds split wood into the cooking fire. The smell reaches you first. Smoke mixes with oats, onions, damp ash, sour ale, and yesterday's roasted meat. It is heavy, practical, and comforting in the way only early morning food can be. The head cook stands beside the main table. She's broad-shouldered, alert, and clearly unimpressed by anyone moving too slowly. Her wool sleeves are tied back from her wrists, and a linen covering keeps her hair away from the food. She directs the room with brief gestures. More water, less salt, move that pot. Nothing is shouted unless necessary. The kitchen staff already know their duties because they repeat them every morning. Routine saves time, reduces mistakes, and allows work to continue even while everyone remains tired. Breakfast must feed guards, servants, craftsmen, children, and members of the noble household. The meal will differ according to rank, but almost everyone needs something warm before facing the courtyard. Porridge is common, bread is essential, ale appears early. You watch a boy carry a bucket toward the water vessel near the wall. He moves slowly because the surface outside has partially frozen, making each trip more difficult. Water becomes troublesome during severe cold. Wells may remain usable, especially when sheltered, but ropes stiffen, buckets ice over, and spilled water turns paths into dangerous glassy patches. Snow can be melted, although that consumes fuel and produces less water than people often expect. The boy returns with red hands. An older servant notices and pushes a warm cup toward him before sending him back to work. Kindness appears briefly, then duty resumes, near the hearth. Two women prepare bread dough on a floured board. Their fingers press and fold with steady rhythm while they discuss the storm in low voices. One believes the snow will stop by midday. The other disagrees. Neither sounds worried enough to halt her work. Bread production formed one of the central labours of a large medieval household. Grain had to be stored, milled, sifted, mixed, kneaded, shaped, and baked, often through several coordinated stages. The finest flour usually went upward through the social order. Coarser loaves fed most of the household. Even stale bread remained useful. It could thicken soups, absorb sauces, or serve as a flat surface beneath other food during meals. Nothing respectable is thrown away easily. A scullion crouches near a basin, scrubbing pots with sand, ash, and hot water. His task appears endless. Grease clings stubbornly to iron and bronze, while smoke blackens everything exposed to the hearth. He looks exhausted. His day has barely begun. Scullions often occupied one of the lowest positions in a large kitchen. They cleaned vessels, carried fuel, removed waste, fetched water, and stood close to heat, smoke, and sharp-tempered superiors. It was not glamorous work. It was indispensable. You leave the kitchen and enter the courtyard. The cold strikes immediately. Wind drives loose snow against your face, and the darkness seems almost blue beneath the clouded sky. Lanterns glow near stable doors, creating small circles of amber light across the white ground. Stable hands are already working. One carries hay beneath a covered walkway. Another checks a horse's legs for swelling. A third breaks ice forming along the edge of a water trough. The horses stamp and breathe heavily. Their warmth fills the stable with a thick smell of hay, leather, manure, and damp animal coats. After the open courtyard, the space feels almost comfortable. Almost. The stable master runs one hand along a horse's back, checking the blanket and skin beneath it. Horses can suffer greatly in cold weather if left wet, underfed, or exposed to draughts. Their care demands constant attention. A noble household might depend upon horses for travel, communication, hunting, agriculture, and war. Losing one during winter means more than losing an animal. It means losing mobility, wealth, and security. The finest horses receive careful treatment. Smaller working animals matter just as much. You notice a stable boy carrying heated stones wrapped in old cloth toward a corner where a sickly mule stands apart from the others. Whether the stones will help much is uncertain, but the boy handles them with sincere hope. Medieval animal care combined practical observation with inherited custom. Some treatments worked through warmth, rest, or cleanliness. Others rested upon beliefs that modern readers might find less convincing. People used what they had. Experience served as their greatest teacher. Above the stable, the sky begins to lighten slightly. Dawn is approaching. The snow continues. Across the courtyard, Another group of servants clears a narrow path between the hall and the kitchen buildings. They use wooden shovels, brooms, and flat boards to push snow aside. Progress is slow. The wind returns much of it. One man stops and stares at the drift with quiet disappointment. Then he begins again, because the path must remain open. This repetition defines winter labour. You finish a task, the weather reverses it, you repeat the task. Several chamber servants pass carrying chamber pots toward a disposal area beyond the main living quarters. Their expressions are resigned, and nobody offers them admiration. Castles require constant cleaning. Human waste, kitchen refuse, animal dung, ashes, spoiled food, and muddy rushes accumulate quickly when many people share enclosed spaces. The romantic image of castle life becomes less romantic when someone must empty every vessel before breakfast. A small detail from household records reveals how carefully some great residences assigned cleaning duties. Certain servants were responsible for specific chambers, passages, fireplaces, or privies, suggesting that order depended upon clearly divided labour. Not every castle followed identical rules. Still, the principle remains obvious. Someone must do everything. Inside the keep, chamber servants stir banked embers and add fresh fuel. They shake bedding, open shutters briefly, sweep floors, and prepare clothing for their employers. The work is intimate. A noble person relies upon servants to handle garments, washing water, fires, meals, and messages. Privacy becomes difficult when daily comfort depends upon constant assistance. You enter a small chamber where two women are arranging wool blankets. The stone walls feel icy. A narrow brazier gives limited warmth, while a tapestry along one side helps soften the cold surface. One servant places a warmed stone beneath the bedding, wrapped carefully to prevent scorching. The bed itself is impressive. Its curtains create a smaller enclosed space where body heat can gather more effectively. Thick hangings also offer protection from drafts, smoke, noise, insects, and curious eyes. A bed is more than furniture. It is shelter within shelter. A sleepy child remains buried beneath the blankets while servants work around him. He opens one eye, decides morning is unacceptable, and disappears again beneath the covers. The women exchange amused glances. Childhood has changed in many ways. That reaction has not. By sunrise, the castle is fully awake. The bell sounds through the storm, summoning some residents to prayer and marking the beginning of another working day. Servants cross the courtyard carrying bread, water, tools, fuel, cloth, and messages. You stand beneath the covered passage and watch them move. Their names may never enter chronicles, their faces will not appear in royal genealogies, yet the castle survives because they wake first. They light the fires, feed the animals, prepare the food, clear the paths, clean the chambers, and make noble comfort possible through thousands of unnoticed actions. Snow falls beyond the roofline. The wind remains bitter. Another day has begun. The servants have cleared only a narrow path across the courtyard when another problem begins to demand attention. The fires are weakening. Not all of them, and not yet dangerously, but enough that people begin moving with greater urgency. In every occupied chamber, kitchen, workshop, and guard room, heat depends upon a steady supply of fuel. The castle may be made of stone, its survival still rests upon wood. You follow two labourers beneath a covered passage toward the main fuel store. Each carries a broad wicker basket strapped across his back, already darkened by years of soot and damp weather. The snow outside remains thick and restless. Wind pushes it beneath doors and through openings in the walls. Fine white powder gathers along thresholds, where hurried feet crush it into grey slush. The fuel store stands near the outer wall. Its roof slopes sharply so snow can slide away, though a heavy ridge has already formed along one side. Beneath the shelter, stacks of split logs rise almost to the beams. At first, the supply looks enormous. Then you remember how many fires must be fed. The great hall consumes large pieces of oak throughout the day. Kitchens burn fuel for boiling, roasting, baking, and heating water. Smaller chambers use braziers, while craftsmen need charcoal for metalwork and other specialized tasks. Every flame has an appetite. The castle steward arrives with a clerk and examines the woodpile in silence. They speak briefly about the number of remaining stacks, the condition of the driest logs, and the difficulty of collecting more during the storm. No one suggests wasting fuel. An experienced household might prepare large quantities of firewood before winter, cutting and seasoning it months in advance. Freshly cut wood burns poorly, produces heavy smoke, and gives less useful heat than dry timber. Seasoning requires patience. Winter punishes those who begin too late. You take one log from the nearest pile. Its bark feels rough beneath your fingers, and the exposed wood inside remains dry despite the damp air. That dryness represents careful planning from the previous spring and summer. Perhaps workers felled the tree in a nearby woodland. Perhaps tenants delivered the wood as part of their obligations. Perhaps carts spent weeks carrying loads toward the castle before autumn rain softened the roads. Now every piece matters. The two labourers fill their baskets and return toward the great hall. You walk beside them, feeling the wind pull at your cloak whenever the passage opens toward the courtyard. One man complains that oak logs are heavier before breakfast. His companion replies that they become even heavier after lunch. Neither smiles immediately, then both do. Gentle humour keeps work moving when comfort offers little assistance. Inside the hall, the central hearth has sunk into a deep bed of glowing embers. Red light pulses beneath a layer of ash, while thin flames curl around the remaining wood. The firekeeper kneels beside it. This duty may belong to different servants depending upon the size and organization of the household. Whoever holds it must understand how to revive embers without smothering them, wasting kindling, or filling the room with unnecessary smoke. He begins with patience. First, he shifts the ash using an iron tool. Then he exposes the hottest coals and places dry twigs across them. Small pieces follow, arranged loosely enough for air to pass between them. He bends close and blows. A tiny flame appears, it trembles, fades, and returns. Everyone nearby continues working, yet several people watch from the corners of their eyes. A fire that dies completely can be relit, of course, but doing so requires more effort and sometimes valuable materials. Soon the kindling catches, the fire brightens, a larger log is lowered carefully into place, sending sparks upward toward the smoke-darkened beams. Warmth begins returning to the nearest benches. You extend your hands toward it and feel heat spread slowly across your palms. The sensation is immediate, but warming the room takes far longer. Stone absorbs cold relentlessly. Walls, floors, benches, tables, and tools remain chilled even after the air becomes comfortable. Anyone sitting too close to an exterior wall discovers that winter seems to live inside the masonry itself. Thick hangings help, so do shutters, curtains, rushes, and packed gatherings of human bodies. Still, nobody mistakes the hall for summer. A familiar but important feature of medieval domestic life was the open hearth. In many great halls, the fire burned near the centre of the room rather than inside a later-style wall fireplace. Smoke escaped through roof openings, shutters, gaps, and whatever path the air allowed. Sometimes it escaped well, sometimes it did not. Today, the low weather presses smoke downward. It drifts beneath the rafters and spreads through the upper hall before thinning near the doors. Your eyes begin watering again, and several people cough without interrupting their tasks. The firekeeper studies the smoke with irritation. He adjusts the logs. Someone opens a high shutter briefly, allowing a blast of cold air to enter. The smoke shifts, curls, and eventually rises more cleanly, for several moments. Everyone receives less smoke and more cold. Medieval comfort frequently involves choosing the less unpleasant problem. In a smaller chamber above the hall, servants tend a brazier filled with charcoal. It provides concentrated heat without the same large flames. Though charcoal can produce dangerous fumes in poorly ventilated spaces, people in E1105 understood some practical risks through experience, even when they lacked modern explanations. A headache, dizziness, or sudden weakness might be blamed upon bad air, smoke, illness, or spiritual causes. The exact boundaries of that understanding remain difficult to recover. Written sources describe household arrangements more readily than private sensations, leaving modern researchers to reconstruct ordinary awareness from scattered evidence. You enter the chamber carefully. The air smells dry, metallic, and faintly bitter. A servant has placed the brazier away from curtains and bedding, watching it closely while another repairs a draft around the shutter. Fire offers life. Fire also threatens everything. Most ISTA buildings contain timber beams, wooden floors, straw, rushes, clothing, bedding, wax, oil, and dried food. One overturned lamp or careless spark can spread through a crowded castle with terrifying speed. For this reason, flames are supervised constantly. Water buckets remain nearby, ashes removed carefully, children are warned repeatedly. One rather unusual household rule recorded in later medieval settings required servants to cover or extinguish certain lights before sleeping. The custom was practical enough, though enforcement probably varied according to discipline and exhaustion. Here, nobody trusts a flame left alone. Back in the courtyard, a group of workers attempts to reach another wood store near the wall. Snow has drifted against the door until only the upper boards remain visible. Wooden shovels bite into the packed surface. The workers clear it slowly, throwing each load aside while wind returns loose powder around their ankles. You help push snow away from the threshold. It feels surprisingly heavy where the lower layers have begun to compact. Your shoulders ache after only a few minutes, and cold air burns inside your lungs. The door finally opens inward. A dark, dry smell emerges from the store. More logs, more peat, bundles of brushwood, several sacks of charcoal. Relief passes through the workers, though nobody celebrates loudly. The supplies are useful, but they must last. Peat burns differently from wood, producing a distinctive earthy smoke in regions where it was available. It could supplement timber, especially when local forests were limited or heavily managed. Whether this particular castle would rely upon peat depends upon geography. The surrounding land may provide woodland, scrub, managed coppices, or distant sources reached by cart. The storm has temporarily made every source distant. By afternoon, fuel distribution becomes carefully organized. Large logs go to the hall, smaller pieces reach chambers, brushwood feeds kitchen flames. Charcoal is reserved for braziers and skilled work. Nothing moves without purpose. The steward's clerk marks quantities upon a wax tablet, pressing symbols into the softened surface with a pointed stylus. The marks can later be smoothed away and reused. Simple technology serves complicated management. You carry a final bundle toward the hall as darkness gathers early beyond the courtyard. Snow continues falling. Although the wind has eased enough for flakes to descend more gently, inside, the great fire burns steadily again. Its glow touches faces, cups, benches, and hanging cloths with deep orange light. People draw nearer as evening settles over the fortress. A child holds both hands toward the flames. An old guard warms one boot after returning from the wall. A servant turns wet gloves upon a wooden peg, careful not to place them close enough to scorch. The room breathes easier. Still, everyone knows the fire is not permanent. It survives because someone gathers wood, someone protects it from dampness, someone carries it through snow, someone wakes before dawn to uncover the embers. Warmth here is never automatic. It is built, guarded, measured, and renewed. As another log settles into the hearth, sparks rise briefly and disappear into shadow. The sound is soft, almost soothing, while the storm continues its quiet assault beyond the walls. For now, the flames remain awake, and so does the castle. morning gradually gives way to afternoon, although the sky never becomes truly bright. The blizzard has wrapped the countryside in a pale grey veil, allowing only a faint light to filter through the narrow windows of the castle. Outside, snow continues to drift across the battlements. Inside, another kind of preparation quietly unfolds. It is time to think about food, not merely today's meal, the next week's meals, perhaps even next month's. You follow the steward down a narrow stone stair that leads beneath the great hall. The air changes almost immediately. It becomes cooler, stiller, and surprisingly dry. These lower rooms serve an important purpose. They protect valuable supplies from weather, thieves, and wandering animals. Thick stone walls help maintain a more stable temperature than the changing conditions above ground. A servant unlocks a heavy oak door reinforced with iron bands. The hinges groan softly. Inside lies one of the castle's storerooms. Shelves line the walls from floor to ceiling. Wooden barrels stand in careful rows. Sacks are stacked neatly upon raised platforms to keep them away from damp stone floors. Nothing appears random. Everything has its place. The steward pauses for a quiet inspection. He runs one hand across the lid of a grain barrel before lifting it slightly. The smell of oats rises into the cool air, fresh despite months in storage. Nearby rests another barrel filled with barley. Another contains dried peas. A smaller one holds beans. Together they represent security. Grain forms the foundation of a life inside the castle. Bread, porridge, thick soups, and simple puddings all begin with these humble stores. Should they fail, every other problem grows larger. You notice that many barrels carry simple carved marks burned into the wood. These symbols help identify their contents without opening each container, in households where dozens of similar casks stand together. Such practical markings save valuable time. The steward nods with quiet satisfaction. So far, nothing has spoiled. That is not always guaranteed. Moisture, insects, mice, and careless handling threaten stored food throughout the year. Winter protects against some dangers while creating others. A barrel that freezes may crack. A leaking roof may ruin grain. A hungry rat can squeeze through remarkably small openings. Fortunately, the castle cat and her offspring have been unusually successful this season. Their contribution receives little ceremony. It is appreciated nonetheless. You move farther into the storeroom. The next chamber smells entirely different. Salt. It reaches your nose before your eyes adjust to the dimness. Several wooden tubs contain thick layers of coarse salt surrounding preserved meat. Pork, beef, and smaller cuts rest safely beneath white crystals that draw moisture away and slow decay. The appearance is simple. The value is considerable. Salt is one of medieval Europe's most precious everyday resources. It preserves food, seasons meals, and supports long-term storage during seasons when fresh supplies become uncertain. Without it, winter becomes far more difficult. A kitchen servant carefully removes one piece of pork from a barrel before replacing the lid immediately. Nothing remains exposed longer than necessary. Nearby hang long strips of smoked bacon. Their rich aroma blends with oak smoke that has settled into the meat over many weeks. Proper smoking requires patience rather than constant attention, once prepared correctly. These cuts may last for months. You begin to understand why medieval meals often relied upon preserved foods during winter. Fresh vegetables are limited. Fresh fruit is rare. The castle survives because someone prepared wisely during warmer seasons. The steward opens another door. This room feels almost cheerful by comparison. Bundles of dried herbs hang from ceiling beams. Garlic, sage, thyme, parsley, mint. Their fragrances mingle into something unexpectedly fresh, despite the surrounding cold. Several baskets contain onions. Others hold leeks. Strings of garlic bulbs hang neatly beside the wall. Root vegetables rest beneath layers of straw where they remain protected from frost. One elderly servant smiles while examining a basket of apples. Not every fruit has survived perfectly. Most have. She removes one soft apple before placing the remaining fruit back beneath clean straw. Waste spreads quickly. Care prevents it. The castle cook enters carrying a small wax tablet. She consults quietly with the steward about the evening meal. One smoked ham should remain untouched. Another barrel of peas may be opened. The onions are plentiful. The dried fish should wait until next week. No argument follows, only planning. This careful balance governs nearly every meal throughout the winter. A popular modern image imagines medieval banquets overflowing every evening with endless roasted meats. Reality proves far more measured. Great feasts certainly occurred on important occasions. Ordinary days required sensible management. Even wealthy households respected the limits of their supplies. You continue into another chamber. Rows of cheese rest upon wooden shelves. Some wheels are large enough to require 2 people to lift comfortably. Their surfaces have hardened with age, protecting the softer interior. A young servant turns several cheeses carefully. This simple task helps them mature evenly while reducing spoilage. It is repetitive work. It matters. The smell here is surprisingly pleasant. Rich, nutty, earthy. The steward pauses again to inspect everything. He rarely touches the food unnecessarily instead. He watches. He notices moisture, dust, tiny cracks, anything unusual. Good management often begins with careful observation. One small detail catches your attention. Several baskets contain walnuts and hazelnuts gathered months earlier. Their shells provide natural protection, allowing them to remain edible throughout much of the winter. They also add welcome variety to meals otherwise dominated by grains and preserved foods. Children occasionally receive a few as treats. Adults enjoy them as well, provided they are not needed elsewhere. Beyond the food storage lies another cool chamber. This one contains barrels of ale. The air smells pleasantly sweet with hints of grain and yeast. Each cask rests securely upon wooden supports, making it easier to draw liquid without disturbing sediment at the bottom. Weak ale forms part of everyday life. It accompanies meals, provides hydration, and often tastes safer than uncertain water collected from questionable sources. Its strength varies considerably. Not every barrel contains the same brew. One of the cellar servants taps a barrel gently with a small wooden mallet. He listens, apparently satisfied. He moves on. Experience has trained his ears. You could watch him all afternoon and still miss half the signs he notices instinctively. Knowledge like this rarely appears in books. It passes from one worker to another through years of shared labour. There is another room still. This chamber surprises you. It contains honey. Several clay pots hold thick golden honey collected during warmer months. Honey sweetens food, preserves fruit, and occasionally appears in medicinal mixtures prepared by the castle healer. Sugar exists. Very little reaches places like this. Honey remains the familiar sweetness of daily life. Nearby stand several jars of vinegar, useful in cooking, useful in preserving, useful in cleaning certain utensils. Its sharp scent fills the room as you return toward the staircase. You notice a narrow opening near the ceiling where cool air circulates gently through the storeroom. Ventilation helps protect supplies. Too much moisture encourages mold. Too little airflow creates other problems. The builders may not have understood every scientific reason. They certainly appreciated the practical results. Architectural historians continue examining exactly how medieval storehouses balanced temperature and airflow in different regions. Surviving buildings reveal useful patterns, although local climate, available materials, and later renovations make broad conclusions difficult. Each castle solves similar problems in slightly different ways. You climb back toward the Great Hall. The smell changes once more. Stone gives way to smoke. Smoke yields to bread. Bread blends into roasting onions. The kitchen is preparing the evening meal. Large iron pots bubble steadily above the fire. Inside them simmer barley, peas, onions, herbs, and pieces of salted pork that have slowly softened during hours of cooking. The broth has become wonderfully rich. One cook tastes it using a wooden spoon. She nods once before adding another handful of chopped leeks. Nearby, fresh bread emerges from the oven with browned crusts that crack softly as they cool. The aroma fills the room. Even the tiredest servant seems to stand a little straighter. You carry several loaves into the great hall. People look up with quiet anticipation, not excitement, gratitude. Warm food means another successful day, another reminder that careful preparation months ago still protects everyone gathered inside these walls. Outside, the blizzard continues its patient work across the silent countryside. Inside, bowls are filled one after another, bread is broken, ale is poured, steam rises gently through the smoky air. The castle eats together, sustained not by abundance alone, but by foresight, discipline, and countless unseen hands that prepared every bite long before the first snowflake ever touched the ground. After the evening meal, the great hall slowly changes its purpose. Bowls disappear first, then cups. Benches shift across the floor while servants gather crumbs, replace damaged rushes, and carry the remaining bread towards safer storage. The room that served as dining space now begins preparing for sleep. You watch the transformation quietly. It happens without ceremony. People know where they belong. Some servants will remain near the hall fire, others climb towards smaller chambers inside the keep. Guards prepare to rest in turns, never all at once, while children are gathered beneath blankets before they become too tired to cooperate. The blizzard continues outside. Its voice has softened slightly, though the wind still brushes the shutters with long, whispering strokes. Snow presses against the lower doors and gathers along every exposed ledge. Inside, sleeping places must be made warm enough. That is the challenge. Comfort comes later. You follow a chamber servant up a spiral stair cut within the thickness of the tower wall. The steps are narrow and uneven, polished smooth in the centre by years of passing feet. The air grows colder as you climb. A small lamp casts trembling light across the stone. Shadows bend around the curve ahead, making the staircase seem longer than it really is. At the top, the servant pushes open a heavy wooden door. A private chamber waits beyond. Private, however, does not mean empty. A noble bed occupies the far side of the room, surrounded by thick curtains suspended from a wooden frame. 2 chests stand near the wall. A stool, a small table, and a brazier complete most of the furniture. Several attendants are already working. One shakes out a wool blanket. Another carries heated stones wrapped in cloth. A third checks the bed curtains for dampness. You move closer. The mattress is not a single soft object like those found in modern bedrooms. It consists of layered materials arranged for support and insulation. The finest bedding may contain feathers. Less luxurious mattresses are filled with wool, straw, dried grass, or mixed plant materials. Even noble beds often rely upon several layers placed over ropes or wooden supports. The ropes can loosen. When they do, the sleeper sinks. A servant must tighten them regularly. This practical task may explain the later phrase about sleeping tightly, although language historians remain cautious about drawing direct connections from household habits to familiar expressions. The evidence is appealing. It is not conclusive. You press one hand lightly against the mattress. It feels firmer than expected. The top layer gives slightly beneath your palm, but the structure below remains rigid. Thick sheets soften the surface, while folded blankets build protection against the cold. The bed curtains matter just as much when closed. They trap body heat within a smaller space. They block drafts moving across the chamber and offer a little separation from servants, children, guests, or relatives sharing the room. Complete solitude remains unusual. Even a wealthy lord may sleep beside a spouse, near young children, or within hearing distance of attendants resting on pallets. The household remains close, sometimes uncomfortably close. The room smells of warm stone, old wool, beeswax, and faint wood smoke from the brazier. Beneath these scents lies another odour, softer but persistent, produced by bodies, damp clothing, leather, and bedding that cannot be washed frequently during winter. Cleanliness exists, perfection does not. Linen sheets may be changed when labour, water, weather, and status allow. Blankets are aired, beaten, brushed, and occasionally exposed to smoke or herbs believed to discourage insects. A small bundle of lavender rests inside one chest. Rosemary and dried mint appear nearby. Their fragrances improve the chamber while carrying associations with freshness, comfort, and protection. One overlooked aspect of medieval sleep is how much effort surrounded the bed before anyone entered it. Bedding had to be inspected, warmed, rearranged, and guarded from sparks, moisture, lice, fleas, mice, and curious dogs. Sleep requires preparation. The servants complete their work and lower the curtains halfway. The chamber already feels quieter. You descend one level and enter another room where several children are settling for the night. Their beds are smaller, though still shared. Two boys argue softly over blanket space. An older girl tells them to stop moving. A nurse places another cover across all three, then tucks the edges beneath the mattress with practiced firmness. Shared sleeping provides warmth. It also creates disputes. One child complains that another has cold feet. The accusation is probably accurate. The nurse ignores it. Near the hearth, a small wooden cradle stands within reach of the warmest air. Its occupant sleeps beneath layers of cloth, entirely unaware of the storm beyond the walls. Cradles could be simple and portable, allowing infants to remain near working adults throughout the day. At night, they might be moved into chambers where heat and supervision were easiest to maintain. Parents understood cold as a serious danger. They also feared drafts intensely. Medieval medical thinking often blamed moving air for illness, pain, and weakness. While their explanations differed from modern medicine, avoiding prolonged exposure made practical sense inside frozen stone buildings. You continue downward toward the hall. There, sleeping arrangements appear much less formal. Servants spread pallets along the walls and near benches. Some use sacks stuffed with straw. Others fold cloaks beneath their heads or share thick coverings with companions. Rank determines distance from the fire. Seniority matters too. The warmest positions are not taken casually. An older retainer receives a place close to the hearth because his joints ache in cold weather. A young kitchen worker settles farther away, wrapped in 2 rough blankets and an apron that still smells faintly of onions. The great hall remains noisy even after lights dim. People cough. Someone turns over. A dog scratches beneath a bench. Leather creaks whenever a sleeper shifts position. The fire settles with small cracking sounds while embers collapse inward. You choose a place near the wall. The stone behind you feels bitterly cold, even through folded cloth. A servant notices and hangs an extra piece of wool between your pallet and the masonry. The difference is immediate, not dramatic. Enough. Sleeping near the floor presents another problem. Cold air settles low. Drafts creep beneath doors. Mice explore the edges of the room once human movement slows. A young page places his boots beneath his head before lying down. This keeps them close, prevents theft, and stops small animals from investigating them during the night. It also creates a remarkably uncomfortable pillow. He appears accustomed to it. A curious custom recorded in some medieval households involved sleeping partly dressed during severe cold. People might remove outer garments while keeping linen layers, caps, stockings, or other clothing in place. Nightclothes as a distinct category were not universal. Warmth mattered more than elegance. You retain your linen underlayer and wrap yourself in wool. The fabric feels coarse beneath your chin. It scratches slightly, but the weight is comforting. Another blanket lies across your legs, shared with the sleeper beside you. No one finds this strange. The hall gradually darkens. Most candles are extinguished to save material and reduce the risk of fire. One lamp remains near the doorway. The hearth continues glowing beneath careful supervision. A firekeeper rests nearby. He does not sleep deeply. At intervals, he wakes, adjusts a log, checks the sparks, and settles again. Elsewhere, guards follow a similar pattern. Rest comes in portions. The castle cannot afford universal unconsciousness. Researchers studying medieval sleep have proposed that many people followed a divided pattern, resting for several hours, waking during the night, then sleeping again before dawn. Surviving references from later centuries support this practice in parts of Europe. Whether it occurred consistently in 1105 is harder to establish. Season, labour, age, health, and household routine probably created wide variation. Tonight, the storm encourages interrupted sleep. Wind presses against the doors. Roof timbers answer with soft groans at some point. Snow slides from a nearby roof and lands outside with a heavy muffled sound. Several people wake briefly, listen, then relax when no alarm follows. You remain still. Warm breath gathers beneath the edge of your blanket. The shared air smells of smoke, wool, straw, and the lingering remains of supper. It is not luxurious. It is deeply human. Around you, dozens of sleepers lie close together because closeness preserves heat, offers reassurance, and makes danger harder to face alone. The great hall no longer feels like a ceremonial room. It feels like a shelter. Beyond the walls, the world has disappeared beneath snow. Roads, fields, fences, and familiar paths lie hidden under the same pale silence. Inside, bodies create their own small climate. The dog beneath the bench sighs. Someone whispers a final prayer. The fire glows lower, casting slow red light across the floor. You close your eyes. Stone surrounds you. Wool covers you. The storm continues, but its sound now seems distant, softened by curtains, timber, breathing, and sleep. For a few quiet hours, the castle holds everyone together. You wake before dawn to the sound of hooves striking wood. The noise comes from across the courtyard, heavy and irregular, followed by the low breath of a restless horse. Around you, sleepers shift beneath blankets, but only a few raise their heads. Animal sounds are part of castle life. They belong to the night as naturally as crackling logs, creaking beams, and distant wind. You pull your cloak around your shoulders and step into the passage. The air feels cold enough to tighten every muscle in your face. Outside, the blizzard has weakened, though snow still falls in slow, thick flakes. The courtyard lies almost silent. Lantern-light glows beside the stable door, where a stable boy struggles with a wooden latch. Snow has drifted against the lower boards, making the entrance difficult to open. You help push. The door gives suddenly. Warm, damp air rolls outward, carrying the rich smell of hay, leather, manure, grain, and animal breath. After the frozen courtyard, the stable feels almost welcoming, almost inside. Several horses stand in narrow stalls separated by wooden rails. Their bodies appear dark and enormous beneath the weak lantern light. Steam rises from their nostrils whenever they breathe. One horse stamps again. The stable boy approaches slowly, speaking in a low voice. The animal has become nervous because wind rattles part of the roof. A loose wooden panel knocks whenever a strong gust reaches the outer wall. The horse cannot understand the sound. It only knows something moves overhead. You stand near the stall while the boy strokes the animal's neck. His hand follows the same gentle path again and again until the stamping gradually stops. Trust is built through repetition. Medieval castles depended heavily upon horses, though not every horse served the same purpose. Powerful war horses attracted the greatest admiration. But ordinary riding horses, pack animals, cart horses, ponies, and mules performed most daily work. A castle might own only a few highly trained military mounts. It needed many practical animals. These animals carried grain, firewood, messages, weapons, people, and building materials. When roads became muddy or snow-covered, their strength became even more valuable. You move farther into the stable. A groom examines a grey mare by running both hands along her legs. He checks for swelling, heat, cuts, and stiffness. No written manual is needed. Years of experience guide his fingers. He notices changes too small for you to see. A horse kept indoors for too long may become restless, weak, or difficult to manage. Yet leading animals outside during a blizzard creates other dangers. The stable master must balance movement against exposure. Today, short walks beneath covered areas may be possible. Anything longer must wait. Hay is distributed carefully. Each portion is measured by eye, although the stable master probably knows the total supply with remarkable precision. Horses require substantial food even when they perform little work. Cold increases their need for energy. That creates pressure on stored grain and fodder. Bundles of hay fill the loft overhead. But the stack is not endless. Straw serves as bedding, insulation, packing material, and sometimes emergency fodder of poor quality. Every handful has several possible uses. A stable boy climbs the ladder and drops fresh bedding into an empty stall. Dust rises through the lantern light, making everyone cough. The smell of dry grass briefly overpowers everything else nearby. A mule watches with an expression of profound suspicion. It turns its head away whenever anyone approaches, then looks back once they leave. One less celebrated detail of medieval transport is the mule's value. Mules were often strong, steady, and capable of carrying loads across rough ground where larger horses struggled. They lacked the glamour of a knight's mount. They made themselves useful instead. The sickly mule you saw earlier remains in the far corner. Its blanket has been changed. And a bucket of warm mash stands nearby. The animal eats slowly. That alone seems encouraging. The stable boy smiles when he notices. Small victories matter during winter. Beyond the horse stalls lies a lower enclosure for cattle and sheep. The space is darker, noisier, and far less orderly. Several sheep press close together beneath a timber shelter. Their thick wool provides insulation, but wet fleece can become heavy and chilling. Servants rub the dampest animals with rough cloths. The sheep object loudly. They survive the indignity. Cattle breathe heavily inside a separate pen, warming the air with their bodies. Their presence creates both comfort and difficulty. More animals mean more heat. They also mean more manure, moisture, disease risk, and food consumption. The floor must be covered with straw and cleaned regularly. During severe weather, waste can accumulate faster than servants remove it. The smell becomes powerful. You try breathing through your mouth. This does not improve matters. A young worker carries dung toward the courtyard in a wicker container, once collected. Manure remains useful for fields, gardens, and certain practical household needs. Waste rarely stays waste for long. In some colder regions and rural settings, livestock were sometimes kept close to human living spaces because their body heat helped warm nearby rooms. Whether animals regularly occupied the lower levels of fortified residences in early 12th century England depends upon the castle's design and local custom. The evidence is uneven. Archaeology shows flexible use of service buildings, but exact winter arrangements often remain difficult to reconstruct. This castle keeps most animals in separate structures. The separation protects food and living quarters. It does not remove the smell, as daylight slowly strengthens. You notice chickens beneath a covered lean to near the kitchen wall. They scratch through straw with determined little movements, searching for grain that may not exist. Their feathers puff outward against the cold. An older woman scatters a measured handful of barley across the ground. The birds rush toward it with sudden enthusiasm, their quiet clucking becoming a brief commotion. Egg production often declines during dark winter months. Shorter days, cold temperatures, and limited food all affect laying. This makes every winter egg more valuable than it appears. The cook may reserve them for children, sick residents, delicate sources, or members of the noble household. One hen has found a warmer position inside a basket lined with straw. She refuses to move. The woman reaches toward her, receives an angry peck, and withdraws with a sigh. The hen wins. For now. Near the kitchen doorway, two geese patrol the snow with absurd confidence. They hiss at servants, dogs, and one another. Geese could provide meat, feathers, eggs, and surprisingly effective noise whenever strangers approached. They required no formal training. Suspicion came naturally. A page attempts to pass them while carrying a basket. The larger goose stretches its neck and advances. The page retreats. Another servant distracts the bird with grain, allowing the basket to continue its journey. No heroic song will preserve this encounter. It deserves one. Dogs occupy nearly every corner of castle life. Large hounds may assist with hunting or guard the gates. Smaller dogs chase vermin, provide companionship, and collect warmth wherever they find it. Several sleep near the stable entrance. One lifts its head when you approach, recognizes no immediate threat, and returns to sleep. Its coat carries tiny crystals of melted snow. Inside the great hall, another dog has claimed a place close to the hearth. He lies on his side with complete trust, paws twitching through some private dream. A child rests one hand upon his back. The dog does not wake. Hunting dogs could be extremely valuable, especially when trained for tracking, scenting, or pursuing particular animals. Noble households sometimes maintained careful feeding and breeding practices for favoured hounds. Yet many castle dogs were ordinary creatures. They guarded scraps. They barked at unfamiliar footsteps. They offered warmth on cold nights. Cats work more quietly. You find the grey castle cat near a grain store, sitting beside a small dead mouse with unmistakable satisfaction. The steward's clerk looks at the mouse, then at the cat. He gives a solemn nod. Payment has been accepted. Cats rarely appear prominently in official records, though their usefulness around grain, kitchens, barns, and storerooms must have been obvious. Attitudes toward them varied across time and place. Some people appreciated them as practical hunters and household companions. Others associated them with superstition or suspicion. The cat appears unconcerned with either interpretation. She carries her prize away. By late morning, the courtyard becomes busier. Stable workers lead 2 horses beneath a covered walkway for gentle movement. Sheep receive fresh straw. Water buckets are checked repeatedly because ice forms quickly along their rims. The geese continue governing the kitchen entrance. Everywhere, animals shape the rhythm of work. They require food before people rest. They need shelter before snow arrives. They become sick, frightened, stubborn, hungry, and occasionally destructive. They also make survival possible. The Lord's authority may command the castle. Animal strength supports it. Without horses, messages slow and heavy goods remain unmoved. Without sheep, wool becomes scarce. Without cattle, dairy, hides, labour, and meat diminish. Without cats and dogs, vermin and intruders grow bolder. You pause beside the stable door. Snow settles gently upon the courtyard now, no longer driven sideways by violent wind. A horse lowers its head toward the groom's shoulder. The groom scratches beneath its jaw for a moment. Both remain perfectly still. The castle is full of walls, weapons, ranks, and obligations. Yet survival also depends upon quieter relationships. A hand calming a frightened animal, a servant sharing grain with a tired mule, a child sleeping beside a dog, a cat guarding the winter stores. Inside these frozen walls, human life and animal life remain tightly joined, each warming, feeding, carrying, protecting, and enduring beside the other. The morning settles into a pale and muted stillness. Snow continues falling beyond the walls, but the wind has weakened enough for individual flakes to drift slowly past the narrow windows. The castle feels quieter after the commotion of feeding animals and clearing paths. Then the chapel bell sounds. Its tone is not loud, It does not need to be. The note travels through stone passages across the courtyard and into the great hall with a soft metallic gravity. Conversations pause. Several servants lower their eyes. A guard near the door removes his glove and makes the sign of the cross. You follow the movement toward the chapel. The passage leading there is colder than the hall. Your hand brushes the wall, and the stone feels damp beneath your fingertips. Wax, smoke, and incense reach you before the doorway comes into view. The chapel is small, its ceiling arches gently above a narrow space lined with wooden benches. A simple altar stands at the eastern end beneath a painted image of Christ, the Virgin, and several saints. Candle flames tremble before them. Their light touches gold leaf, faded pigment, and the worn edges of carved wood. The room smells of beeswax, old stone, wool, and resinous incense. It is not warm, but it feels enclosed in a different way from the rest of the castle. Here, the storm seems farther away. The lord and his family stand near the front. Servants, guards, craftsmen, and children gather behind them according to rank and habit. There is no perfect equality in the arrangement, yet everyone faces the same altar. The priest begins quietly. His Latin is familiar to some and mysterious to others. Most people do not understand every word, but they recognize the rhythm, gestures, and expected responses. Faith is experienced through repetition. The bowing of heads, the lifting of hands, the movement of candlelight, the sound of a known prayer spoken again. Religious practice shapes the entire calendar of castle life. Saints' days, fasting periods, feast days, baptisms, marriages, funerals, and daily prayers provide structure within a world where weather and harvests remain unpredictable. Time is sacred before it is mechanical. A bell marks prayer, another bell may mark work. The sun decides much of the rest. You stand beside a stone pillar while the priest speaks about endurance. His voice rises gently through the cold room, touching the walls before fading into the hush. People listen closely. The blizzard has made the sermon immediate. Patience no longer feels abstract when roads have vanished, and food must be measured. Charity becomes practical when nearby villages may need shelter. Humility feels sensible when even a powerful lord cannot command the snow to stop. The faith of 1105 is not separate from daily survival. It explains danger, offers comfort, and creates obligations. A failed harvest may be understood through divine judgment, natural hardship, local misfortune, or several explanations at once. Illness may invite prayer alongside herbs and rest. People do not always choose between belief and practical action. They often use both, after the reading. A servant places another candle near the altar. It has been offered for a relative travelling far from the castle. No one knows where he is now. Perhaps he reached shelter before the roads disappeared. Perhaps he waits inside a monastery, manor, or village house. Perhaps he's still moving through the storm. The candle stands in his place. Its flame becomes a small act of hope. You notice other candles beside it. One burns for a sick child, another for a deceased parent, another may have no publicly spoken purpose at all. Private fears gather quietly in sacred spaces. A lesser-known feature of medieval devotion is the intensely personal relationship many people developed with particular saints. One saint might be invoked for travellers, another for childbirth, another for animals, storms, fever, lost objects, or difficult journeys. These choices varied widely. Local tradition mattered. Family habit mattered. A chapel might preserve a relic connected with a favoured saint, even if the relic were only a tiny fragment of bone, cloth, wood, or dust sealed inside a decorated container. This castle possesses a small reliquary. It rests behind the altar, made of wood covered with metalwork and coloured glass. The priest handles it with immense care. He says it contains a fragment associated with St. Martin. Whether the object is genuine cannot be verified by anyone present. That question matters less to them than the devotion surrounding it. Relics connect a distant sacred history with the immediate room. They make holiness feel near enough to touch. Modern specialists remain cautious when evaluating how ordinary worshippers understood such objects. Written accounts usually come from clergy or educated elites, while the private thoughts of servants and peasants survive only indirectly. Some may have believed without hesitation. Others may have carried doubts they never expressed. The surviving evidence rarely captures every shade of belief. What remains clear is that ritual offered stability. You feel this as the service continues. The same words have been spoken during calmer winters. The same gestures marked births, deaths, victories, and long periods of waiting. Outside, weather changes. Inside, the pattern remains. A child near you becomes restless. He shifts from one foot to the other, then stares intently at a drop of wax sliding down a candle. His mother gently touches his shoulder without looking away from the altar. He becomes still again, for perhaps half a minute. Then he begins watching the priest's sleeves. Children remain children, even in sacred silence. The priest finishes the prayer and blesses those gathered. People begin leaving slowly, though several remain behind. The lady of the castle kneels near the altar. An elderly guard lights a candle using another flame. A kitchen servant whispers a prayer for her brother, who lives beyond the valley. You wait near the doorway. Nobody appears hurried. The chapel offers something rare within the castle. A pause. Work waits outside. So do smoke, animals, food stores, icy steps, and damaged fencing. For a few moments, people allow themselves to be still. You step into the courtyard. The cold returns immediately, touching your cheeks and slipping beneath your cloak. Snow has gathered across the chapel roof, softening its hard edges. A servant brushes flakes from the stone cross above the doorway. He does this carefully, almost tenderly. Later in the day, faith appears in smaller forms. A cook traces a cross over bread before it enters the oven. A stable boy murmurs a saint's name while tending the sick mule. A guard carries a small pendant beneath his tunic, hidden against his chest. These actions are brief. They are constant. Religion does not remain inside the chapel. It travels through kitchens, stables, chambers, workshops, and walls. At midday, the priest visits an elderly woman resting near the great hall fire. Her cough has worsened, though she insists it is only the smoke. He speaks with her quietly. Then he places one hand upon her forehead and offers a prayer, while another servant brings warm broth. Prayer and broth arrive together. Neither cancels the other. The castle chapel also preserves books, though only a few. One contains portions of the Gospels, another holds prayers for important services. Their pages are made from carefully prepared animal skin, and their letters were copied by hand over many laborious weeks. Books are precious objects. They are protected from dampness, fire, and careless handling. A young clerk opens one upon a wooden stand while the priest watches. The script appears dense and beautiful. Red initials mark new sections. Small painted figures decorate the margins, including a bird with an unusually serious expression. The bird has no theological importance. It is charming anyway. Margins in medieval manuscripts sometimes contain animals, strange faces, vines, monsters, jokes, and visual puzzles unrelated to the main text. Whether these images amused, instructed, symbolized, or simply relieved the copyist's boredom depends upon the page and its maker. This bird seems to judge everyone. You decide not to offend it. As evening approaches, the chapel bell sounds once more. Its voice crosses the courtyard beneath fresh snow. People pause again, even those unable to attend. The sound reminds them where they are within the day and within a larger order they believe reaches beyond the storm. You stand near the covered passage and listen. The castle remains vulnerable. Fuel can run low, food can spoil, illness can spread, walls can crack, Yet faith gives these dangers a shape people can endure. It offers words when practical answers fail, and duties when fear becomes too large. The bell fades slowly. Snow drifts through the growing darkness, inside the chapel. Candles continue burning before painted saints, each flame small enough to vanish in a breath, yet steady enough to hold back the shadows for another night. The chapel bell fades, and the castle returns to its many separate rhythms. Prayer gives way to labour. Along the covered passage, doors open one after another as craftsmen resume work beneath a sky that offers almost no useful daylight. The storm has turned morning and afternoon into the same grey hour. So flame must replace the sun. You follow the sound of metal striking metal. It comes from a workshop near the outer wall, where the blacksmith has already awakened his forge. Orange light pulses through the doorway, bright against the snow beyond. The heat reaches you first, then the smell. Charcoal smoke, hot iron, leather, sweat, and damp wool fill the enclosed space. Sparks rise whenever the hammer falls, flashing briefly before dying upon the packed earth floor. The smith stands beside the anvil. His sleeves are rolled above his wrists, despite the winter cold outside. Heat shines across his face while an assistant works the bellows behind the forge. Air rushes into the coals. The fire brightens almost white. A strip of iron lies within it, slowly changing colour from dark grey to red, then toward a vivid orange. The smith watches closely because the metal itself tells him when it is ready. There is no clock. There is experience. He draws the iron free with long tongs and places it upon the anvil. The first hammer blow sends a clean ringing note through the workshop. The second follows, then another. You feel each impact faintly through the floor beneath your boots. Today he's repairing a hinge from one of the storage doors. The cold has tightened the wood, while repeated use has bent the iron pin inside its fitting. It is a modest task. Without the hinge, the storeroom cannot close properly. Without a secure door, food and fuel remain vulnerable to weather, animals, and theft. Castle maintenance depends upon repairs like this. Weapons may capture attention, yet nails, hooks, brackets, knives, chains, latches, horseshoes, and cooking tools occupy much of a smith's working life. Surviving household records frequently list payments for ordinary ironwork in astonishing quantities. Large residences consumed nails by the hundreds or thousands, especially during construction and seasonal repair. Even a strong castle constantly wears itself down. Wood splits, leather stretches, iron bends, stone cracks. Winter hastens every weakness. The smith returns the hinge to the forge before shaping it again. His assistant, a narrow-faced boy, pulls the bellows handles in a steady rhythm. Push, release, push again. The work looks simple until you notice his breathing. Each movement requires effort, and the workshop's warmth does not make the task gentle. Near the wall, several tools hang from wooden pegs, hammers of different weights, tongs with different jaws, punches, files, a small chisel. Their shapes reveal specialized knowledge, even when the workshop itself appears rough. Medieval craftsmanship is often more sophisticated than later stereotypes suggest. Skilled workers understood materials through close observation, repeated practice, and knowledge passed from master to apprentice. They may not describe metal through modern chemistry. They know how it behaves. The repaired hinge is cooled in water. Steam rises sharply with a hiss that briefly overpowers the forge. The smell changes at once, becoming metallic and damp. You step back from the cloud. The smith inspects the result, gives a small nod, and moves immediately to the next task. A horseshoe waits upon the bench, beyond the forge. Another workshop feels entirely different. Here, the loudest sound is thread passing through cloth. Several women sit near a narrow window covered with thin horn panels. The material allows pale light into the room while blocking some wind, though candles remain necessary. The air smells of wool, beeswax, and dried herbs. One woman repairs a torn cloak, another works upon a length of woven cloth stretched across her lap, a third spins wool using a spindle, drawing fibres between practiced fingers. Their hands rarely stop. Clothing requires endless attention inside the castle. Cloaks tear upon nails, stockings wear through at the heel, gloves split along seams, blankets fray. Moisture encourages unpleasant smells and weakens certain fabrics over time. In winter, every damaged garment becomes urgent. You sit near the wall and watch a seamstress guide a bone needle through thick wool. She uses wax thread because it slides more easily and resists tangling. Her stitches are small and regular. The repair will remain visible. That does not make it careless. Garments are valuable possessions, often worn, altered, handed down, patched, and repurposed for years. Cloth requires labour at every stage, from tending sheep and preparing fleece to spinning, dyeing, weaving, cutting, and sewing. Throwing away a cloak because of one tear would seem absurd. A basket beside her contains scraps too small for major repairs. They still have uses. Some become padding, some reinforce worn shoes, some wrap hot stones. Some may eventually be twisted into lamp wicks or used for cleaning. Very little reaches the end of its usefulness quickly. One unexpected habit in large households involved dismantling old garments to recover decorative trim, buttons, buckles, or usable sections of cloth. A faded robe might disappear while its best pieces began entirely new lives elsewhere. The women work beneath candlelight. Shadows shift across their faces whenever the flame moves. Fine sewing becomes harder in such conditions, especially when smoke irritates the eyes. One worker pauses and rubs her fingers. The cold has made the joints stiff despite the nearby brazier. She warms them briefly, then continues, across the courtyard. The carpenter's workshop carries the scent of fresh shavings. You hear the rasp of a plane before entering. Long curls of pale wood cover the bench and floor. The carpenter is repairing a shutter damaged by wind during the night. He tests the edge against its frame. It does not fit. He removes another thin shaving, then another. A good shutter must close firmly enough to block snow while remaining loose enough to move when damp wood swells. That balance is difficult. Timber never becomes completely obedient. It expands, contracts, warps, cracks, and absorbs moisture according to weather and grain. The carpenter understands each board as an individual object. He studies knots before cutting. He listens to the sound of his tools. He runs his fingers along the surface to find uneven places too subtle for your eyes. Wooden construction remains central even within stone castles. Roofs, floors, doors, stairs, furniture, scaffolding, hoardings, carts, barrels, and interior partitions all depended upon skilled timberwork. Stone creates the fortress's image. Wood makes much of it usable. A small carving rests near the carpenter's tools. It depicts a fox wearing what appears to be a tiny crown. You ask about it. The carpenter shrugs and says it will decorate the end of a bench if the steward approves. If not, it may become firewood. Humour lives dangerously here. Medieval craftsmen sometimes included playful faces, animals, and strange creatures in carvings placed along roof beams, benches, churches, and household objects. The reasons varied from symbolism to amusement, and sometimes probably simple personal preference. This fox looks far too pleased with itself. You hope it survives. The shutter is finished before midday. 2 servants carry it toward an upper chamber while the carpenter begins examining a cracked stool. Work does not arrive in elegant order. It piles up. Farther inside the keep, a clerk bends over a writing desk. His chamber is colder than the workshop's because parchment, ink, and books must remain away from sparks and heavy smoke. A candle burns close to his left hand. Beside it sits an inkhorn, a sharpened quill, and a small knife used for trimming the pen or correcting mistakes from the parchment surface. He's copying household figures, grain received, wood distributed, Ale consumed, candles remaining, the lines are narrow and disciplined. Writing is physical work. The clerk steadies the parchment with one hand while guiding the quill with the other. Too much pressure may damage the surface. Too little leaves a weak mark. Ink thickens in the cold. He warms the container near the candle, though never close enough to risk spilling or fire. Exactly how widespread detailed written accounting was among castles of this size in 1105 remains open to interpretation. Royal and ecclesiastical administrations preserved increasingly complex records, while smaller households may have relied more heavily upon memory, tallies, and temporary notes. The evidence survives unevenly. Parchment was expensive. Routine documents were often discarded. What remains may represent only the most formal edge of a much larger working system. The clerk turns his attention to a wax tablet. This surface accepts quick notes that can later be erased and reused. He scratches several marks with a stylus, then smooths an older section with the rounded end. Nothing about the action feels grand, yet numbers recorded here determine whether supplies last. By afternoon, the castle seems filled with quiet making. A leather worker repairs harness straps. A cooper checks barrel hoops. A candle maker trims lengths of rush and prepares tallow. A woman in the hall twists cord from plant fibres while listening to nearby conversation. The storm has blocked travel. It has not stopped production. You begin to notice how every craft supports another. The smith repairs the carpenter's tools. The carpenter makes handles for the smith. The leatherworker supplies straps for horses and bellows. The weavers provide cloth for bags, clothing, and coverings. The clerk records what each workshop consumes. No worker stands alone. As darkness arrives, candles appear in more windows. Their light is weak when viewed from the snowy courtyard. Yet each flame marks a room where someone continues shaping iron. Cloth, leather, wood, wax, or words. The castle does not merely endure winter, it repairs itself through it. You pause beneath the covered passage while snow drifts softly beyond the roof. From one doorway comes the ring of a final hammer blow. From another comes quiet laughter. The carved fox now rests upon the finished bench. The steward approved it. Its tiny wooden crown catches the candlelight while craftsmen gather their tools and prepare to return to the hall. Even in a freezing fortress, usefulness leaves a room for beauty, and sometimes, apparently, for a very smug fox. The carved fox remains on its bench the next morning, still wearing its tiny wooden crown. A group of children notices it immediately. One child points, another insists the fox must be a king. A third argues that no sensible kingdom would allow a fox near the henhouse, crowned or otherwise. Their debate grows serious enough to attract the carpenter, who listens for a moment before declaring that the fox rules only over broken stools and wood shavings. The children accept this, for now. You follow them into the great hall, where pale daylight filters through narrow openings and mingles with the orange glow of the fire. The room feels warmer than yesterday, though smoke still curls beneath the roof beams. Children belong everywhere in the castle. They appear beside kitchens, workshops, stairways, chambers, stables, and storage rooms. They are not separated into a world designed entirely for childhood. Instead, they grow within adult spaces, they watch work, they imitate it. They are corrected constantly. They also find ways to play. A girl of perhaps 9 years sits near the hearth with a spindle resting in her lap. An older woman shows her how to draw wool fibres evenly before twisting them into thread. The girl's first attempt forms a thick knot. Her second becomes too thin and breaks. The older woman says nothing unkind. She simply joins the fibres and begins again. Learning happens through repetition. Many medieval children began helping with household work at an early age. Their tasks depended upon family rank, physical ability, gender expectations, local custom, and immediate necessity. A noble child might study manners, religion, riding, music, and estate responsibilities. A servant's child might carry water, gather kindling, tend animals, spin wool, or assist in the kitchen. Neither childhood is free from obligation. The difference lies in which future each task prepares. Near the high table, a young page practices carrying a wooden cup without spilling. He walks slowly between two benches while an older servant observes. The cup contains only water. The lesson remains important. A page must learn how to serve, speak, bow, carry messages, care for clothing, and behave in noble company. Mistakes are expected, though not always welcomed. The boy reaches the table safely, then a dog passes behind him. He turns too quickly. Water splashes across the floor. The older servant closes his eyes for one patient breath before handing him a cloth. No disaster follows, only cleaning. This may be the most accurate education available. You move towards a smaller chamber where several noble children gather round a clerk. Wax tablets rest upon their knees, each marked with letters scratched into the dark surface. The clerk recites a line. The children repeat it. Their voices differ in confidence. One speaks loudly while understanding very little. Another whispers every answer correctly. A younger boy studies the stylus as though it might reveal an easier lesson if examined closely enough. Reading and writing are valuable skills, but not every noble child becomes fully literate. Education varies between households. Some learn Latin prayers and basic letters. Others receive broader instruction from chaplains, clerks, tutors, or monastic teachers. Girls in elite families may also learn to read, manage households, supervise estates, and understand religious texts, especially when their future roles require administration. The pattern is not uniform. Surviving evidence often favours exceptional families because their records endured. This makes ordinary educational practice harder to measure with confidence. Still, learning clearly extends beyond books. The clerk sets the tablets aside and asks the children to identify feast days from the church calendar. They answer more eagerly. Dates tied to celebrations are easier to remember. One child confidently places a saint's day in the wrong season. Another corrects him with such satisfaction that the lesson nearly becomes an argument. The clerk raises one finger. Silence returns. Temporarily. Down in the courtyard, servant children have created a different classroom. They're helping clear snow from the covered path. Their tools are small wooden boards rather than proper shovels. Progress is limited, but enthusiasm remains high because each child competes to build the largest pile. A boy pushes snow toward the wall. A girl immediately claims his pile as part of her fortress. He objects. She strengthens the walls while he speaks. By the time their disagreement ends, the original task has been mostly forgotten. An older worker redirects them with admirable patience. Snow clearing resumes. Children probably played with many simple objects that left little archaeological trace. Sticks, stones, scraps of cloth, bones, nutshells, and bits of wood could become animals, soldiers, tools, dolls, carts, or imaginary castles. Expensive toys were unnecessary. Imagination supplied the missing materials. A small cloth doll appears from beneath one girl's cloak. Its body is stuffed with wool scraps, and two dark stitches form the eyes. The doll wears a tiny faded tunic. One arm has been repaired. The girl carries it while working, tucking it safely into a basket whenever both hands are needed nearby. Two boys play at being knights using wooden spoons as swords. Their duel lasts less than a minute. The cook sees them. The spoons return to the kitchen. The knights become onion carriers. Power changes quickly. One rarely mentioned feature of medieval childhood is how closely games copied adult life. Children practiced mock battles, household tasks, animal care, bargaining, ceremonies, and religious rituals because these were the worlds they observed. Play could entertain. It could also rehearse adulthood in the stable. A young girl brushes a quiet pony under supervision. The brush moves in short strokes through the thick winter coat. She speaks softly to the animal. The pony listens more politely than most humans. Her father checks the girth strap beside her, and he explains how damp leather must be dried slowly. Never directly against fierce heat. She repeats the instruction. Perhaps she will remember it. Perhaps she will remember the pony instead. Children learn through affection as much as correction. The blizzard has limited outdoor freedom, so the hall grows crowded by afternoon. Adults work as benches while children occupy corners, stairs, and spaces beneath tables. Noise rises gradually. A baby cries near the hearth. Someone begins singing quietly. A group of older children plays a guessing game involving animals, saints, and household objects. Each answer produces disagreement over whether the clues were fair. A boy describes something with 4 legs, a tail, and great importance. Everyone guesses horse. He says table. The others protest. He argues that tables are extremely important. The steward, passing nearby, says the boy is correct. This ends the dispute, though not the resentment. At the far end of the hall, an elderly retainer teaches several children a board game using small carved pieces. The board is marked with crossing lines, and the pieces move according to rules that seem simple until someone loses. Games resembling tables, merrills, and other strategy contests were known across medieval Europe in various forms, exact rules changed by region and period, making some reconstructed games partly speculative. The children care nothing for reconstruction. They care about winning. The oldest girl studies the board carefully before trapping her opponent's piece. He accuses her of changing the rules. She replies that he simply forgot them. The old retainer hides a smile. As evening approaches, children begin assisting with practical tasks again. One carries folded cloth toward a chamber. Another gathers rushes near the wall. 2 pages help arrange cups before supper. The transition from play to work happens without announcement. Their lives contain both. You notice how adults correct them through gesture more often than speeches. A raised eyebrow means lower your voice. A pointed finger means return that object. A hand on the shoulder means stand still and listen. The children understand this language perfectly. They do not always obey it. A younger boy has hidden beneath a table to avoid carrying firewood. His boots remain visible. A servant walks past twice before stopping. She lifts the tablecloth. The boy smiles hopefully. Moments later, he crosses the courtyard with 2 small logs held against his chest. Justice has been served. Later, after supper, the storm weakens enough for the children to approach a covered window opening. They peer through a narrow gap at the whitened courtyard. Snow lies deep against the walls. The world beyond the gate has vanished. One child asks whether the fields will ever return. An older girl says they always do. Her certainty comforts everyone nearby, including perhaps herself. Children in 1105 faced modern families would find deeply troubling. Illness, accidents, poor harvests, and winter colds shape their lives from the beginning, yet they are not defined only by hardship. They laugh, they compete, they tease dogs, they misplace tools, they become bored during prayers and fascinated by candle wax. They invent kingdoms ruled by wooden foxes. As beds are prepared, the youngest children grow quiet first. The baby near the hearth sleeps against a nurse's shoulder, one small hand closed around the edge of her veil. Older children resist rest. They whisper beneath blankets and repeat pieces of the day's stories. The crowned fox becomes larger in each retelling, by the final version. It commands an army of geese and defeats a wolf using a spoon. No adult corrects them. The hall settles slowly. You watch the children curl beside relatives, servants, animals, and one another. Their breathing becomes steady beneath layers of wool. Outside, snow continues falling. Inside, the future of the castle sleeps close to the fire, carrying today's lessons into dreams filled with ponies, saints, wooden swords, and impossible fox kings. The children are still asleep when the first guard climbs toward the battlements. You hear his boots on the stone stair before dawn. Each step steady and deliberate, the sound travels through the wall like a slow wooden drum. Outside, the blizzard has changed again. The snow falls more lightly now, but the wind has sharpened. It sweeps across the upper walls with enough force to pull at cloaks, hoods, and exposed skin. You follow the guard upward. The stair narrows as it rises, turning around a central column of cold stone. Your hand slides along the wall for balance, and the surface feels rough beneath your palm. At the top, a wooden door opens outward. The wind strikes immediately. It presses against your chest, fills your hood, and steals the warmth from your face before you can draw a comfortable breath. The battlements stretch ahead beneath a pale morning sky. Snow has gathered along the wall walk, filling corners and softening the hard lines of stone. Guards have cleared a narrow path. Though loose powder continues drifting across it, you step carefully. Ice hides beneath the snow. The valley below has vanished almost completely. Fields, hedges, cottages, and roads have merged into one broad white surface. Only the darkest trees remain visible, their branches bending beneath thick coverings. The castle seems to float above the world. A guard stands near the eastern wall, staring into the distance. His cloak snaps behind him whenever the wind changes direction. He holds a spear in one gloved hand. The weapon is less useful against winter than his eyes. Watching remains the first duty. He studies every dark shape. A moving branch may resemble a rider. A snow-covered bush may resemble a crouching person. A distant bird may briefly suggest smoke. Visibility during a storm plays tricks upon the mind. You stand beside him and try to identify the road. Nothing marks it. Yesterday, carts crossed the valley along a firm track between fields. Today, the route lies hidden beneath deep snow and wind-formed ridges. A traveller unfamiliar with the land could wander far from safety. Even someone who knows the road may lose direction when every familiar feature disappears. The guard points toward a dark line near the trees. For several moments you see nothing. Then the shape moves. A deer emerges briefly from the snowfall before slipping behind the woodland again. The guard relaxes, not completely. Castle watchmen were expected to notice more than armies. They watch for messengers, fires, wandering livestock, suspicious riders, damaged roads, approaching storms, and signals from nearby settlements. Threats did not always carry weapons. Sometimes danger arrived as smoke on the horizon. Sometimes it arrived as silence. You continue along the wall. The stone beneath your boots feels uneven where snow has frozen inside shallow cracks. A servant follows with a wooden shovel, clearing steps and drainage openings if melting snow cannot escape. Water may seep into masonry and freeze again. That expansion damages stone slowly. Winter attacks walls patiently. A mason has already inspected one section near the northwest tower. He found no serious damage, though several joints require attention when weather improves. Mortar does not remain immortal, neither does stone. The popular image of castles as permanent, unchanging structures hides the endless labour required to maintain them. Walls needed repointing, roofs needed patching, timber defences needed replacement, and towers required regular inspection. A fortress survives through repair. The wind alone accomplishes nothing so dramatic today. It simply finds every weakness. Near the northern tower, a wooden screen has been erected to protect guards from the worst gusts. It leans slightly beneath the pressure of accumulated snow. Two men reinforce it using rope and an extra timber brace. Their fingers move slowly inside thick gloves. One drops a wooden peg. It disappears immediately into the snow. Both men stare downward. The younger guard begins searching with his boot. The older one produces another peg from his pouch. Experience includes knowing when not to waste time. Inside the tower, a small guard room offers limited shelter. A brazier glows near the wall while damp cloaks hang from wooden pegs. The room smells of charcoal, wet leather, old straw, and cold metal. Several men sit upon benches, warming their hands before returning outside. Watch duty rotates frequently during severe weather. Standing exposed for too long numbs fingers, feet, and judgment. A guard who cannot feel his hands may struggle to hold a weapon, climb steps, or signal clearly. The captain watches each returning man. He checks faces for unusual paleness. He asks whether boots remain dry. Practical leadership appears in small questions. One guard removes his glove and reveals reddened fingertips. The captain sends him toward the hall fire instead of allowing him to return immediately. The man begins to object. The captain looks at him. The objection ends. Near the brazier, a narrow slit window faces the valley. It was designed for observation and defense, not comfort. Cold air slips through it constantly. You lean close and look outward. A raven crosses the white landscape, its black wings moving slowly against the wind. For a moment, it becomes the only visible creature beyond the castle. Then a horn sounds from the gatehouse. Every guard in the room becomes alert. The sound comes once, then again. Not an alarm, a signal. Someone has been seen approaching. You follow the captain back onto the wall walk. Guards gather near the southern battlement, shielding their eyes from blowing snow. Far below, 3 figures move across the valley. They appear small and uncertain. One leads a horse, another leans heavily upon a staff. The third follows several steps behind. Their path bends away from the hidden road, carrying them toward a frozen drainage ditch. A guard waves a cloth from the wall, another blows the horn again. The figures stop. After a long pause, they change direction. The castle gate remains closed. Opening it during uncertain conditions requires caution. Travellers may be harmless, desperate, dishonest, sick, or pursued. Hospitality matters. Security matters too. The captain sends several armed men into the gate passage while servants prepare blankets and warm drink nearby. No one assumes the newcomers will be admitted immediately. No one leaves them outside without help either. This tension belongs to castle life. Walls protect by separating. Survival sometimes requires opening them. The travellers reach the outer ditch slowly. They are local villagers from a small holding beyond the eastern woods. Their roof has partially collapsed beneath snow, and one elderly man has injured his ankle. The horse carries blankets, a sack of grain, and 2 frightened chickens tied inside a wicker basket. Questions are called down from above. Names, home, purpose, whether anyone is ill. The guards recognize one traveller. That changes everything. The drawbridge is not fully raised, but the gate remains barred until the captain confirms their identity with the steward. The process feels slow. The cold makes every moment seem slower. At last, the wooden bar lifts. The doors open only wide enough for the group to enter. Snow rushes through the gap around them. The horse stumbles once, then regains its footing. Servants take the elderly man beneath both arms and guide him toward the hall. The chickens begin protesting loudly. Their arrival receives more attention than the injured ankle. One escapes the basket. For several breathless moments, guards, servants, and one limping villager chase the bird through the gate passage. The chicken reaches the courtyard. A dog notices. Chaos becomes possible. The cook catches the bird first by throwing her apron over it. She lifts the bundle with dignity. Nobody comments. The gates close again. The bar falls back into place. Relief passes quietly through the passage. The villagers are safe. The castle now has 3 more people to feed. Every act of shelter carries a cost, especially when supplies must last through uncertain weather. The steward knows this. He still orders warm broth by midday. The watch resumes its usual pattern. Guards return to the walls. The valley remains mostly empty. A few tracks now mark the snow where the travellers approached, but wind slowly erases them. You stand once more near the eastern battlement. From this height, The castle appears powerful inside. You know how much that power depends upon ordinary people enduring cold, clearing snow, judging strangers, repairing screens, and staring into whiteness for hours. The guards see little. That is often good news. Peace rarely announces itself. It looks like an empty road, a distant raven, a line of trees holding still beneath snow. The afternoon light begins fading before it ever grows strong. Torches are prepared along the wall and another watch takes position. One guard stamps his feet against the cold. Another adjusts his hood. Both turn toward the silent horizon. Behind them, the castle glows faintly through narrow windows. Before them, winter hides everything. They continue watching. The elderly villager is carried into the great hall while snow melts from his boots. His face has become pale beneath the weathering of age, and his injured foot hangs awkwardly above the floor. Two servants support him beneath the arms while another clears space near the hearth. Warmth reaches him slowly. The journey has left his clothing stiff with ice. His wool cloak is removed first, followed by wet gloves and a leather shoe darkened by slush. The injured ankle beneath is swollen. Though no bone appears to have broken through the skin, that is encouraging. It is not certainty. The castle healer arrives carrying a wooden box with iron hinges. She is an older woman whose calm expression seems unaffected by the crowd forming around the injured man. Everyone watches her hands. She touches the ankle gently, then presses along the lower leg while asking where the pain begins. The villager winces near the joint but can still move his toes. The healer nods. She says the ankle is probably badly twisted. The word probably matters. Without an image beneath the skin, diagnosis depends upon appearance, touch, movement, experience, and the patient's description. The healer has treated similar injuries before. That knowledge guides her. She orders warm water, clean cloth, and 2 straight pieces of wood. A servant hurries toward the kitchen while another searches among the castle's repair supplies. The patient receives a cup of warmed ale. He drinks carefully. Around him, the hall resumes its work. Though people continue glancing toward the hearth, injury attracts attention because everyone understands how quickly it can alter a household. A healthy worker contributes food and labour. An injured worker requires both. The healer removes a small jar from her box. Inside is a thick greenish paste made from crushed herbs, fat, and perhaps a little wine. Its smell is sharp and earthy. She spreads it carefully around the swelling. Plant remedies occupied an important place in medieval care. Monastic texts, household knowledge, local custom, and practical observation preserved treatments involving herbs such as sage, comfrey, plantain, mint, fennel, and many others. Some ingredients provided genuine relief. Others offered comfort without curing the underlying problem. A few may have caused harm. Knowledge did not form one simple system. It grew from many overlapping traditions. The healer wraps the ankle in clean linen, then places the wooden strips along either side. More cloth secures the support without binding it too tightly. Her movements remain slow. Swelling can worsen. The patient must rest. He dislikes this instruction immediately. His family needs help repairing the damaged roof. The healer ignores his argument and tells the steward that the man should not walk for several days. Authority changes direction. In this corner of the hall, the healer decides the injured villager is moved onto a pallet near the fire. His companions receive food and begin explaining what happened. Snow accumulated along one side of their cottage roof during the night. A support beam cracked under the weight, sending part of the thatch inward. Nobody was crushed. The old man slipped while pulling stored grain from the damaged room. Their misfortune feels close now. The castle's thick walls seem more valuable than ever. Yet illness, unlike snow, does not always remain outside. A cough sounds from the bench near the opposite wall, then another. The elderly servant whom the priest visited yesterday has grown weaker. She sits wrapped in blankets, holding a cloth near her mouth while steam rises from a bowl between her hands. Her name is Agnes. She insists she is merely tired. Nobody believes her. You move closer and notice how carefully others avoid crowding her. They are concerned, though they do not understand infection through the precise language familiar today. People recognize that sickness can pass through households. They notice patterns. One person coughs, then a child becomes feverish, then several servants fall ill. The explanations may involve corrupted air, imbalance within the body, divine testing, seasonal influence, or contact with the sick. Observation and theory do not always match neatly. The healer examines Agnes next. She touches the woman's forehead, listens to her breathing, and asks about pain, appetite, sleep, and the colour of what she has coughed up. These questions are practical. They reveal that medieval care was not simply a collection of charms and superstition. Experienced healers observed symptoms closely, even when their understanding of internal causes remained limited. Agnes has no severe chest pain. Her fever seems mild, she can still drink. The healer orders warm broth, honey, rest, and an infusion of herbs. The cook is already preparing it. A small pot simmers near the kitchen fire with water, sage, mint, and honey. Its fragrance is fresh enough to cut through smoke and grease. Honey soothes the throat. Warm liquid eases discomfort. Rest gives the body time. Simple measures sometimes remain the most useful. A cup is carried to Agnes. She tastes it and makes a displeased face. The healer asks whether she prefers illness. Agnes drinks again. Gentle sarcasm belongs to every century. Near the chapel, the priest prepares to visit both patients. His presence does not replace treatment, it accompanies it. He brings a small cross, a prayer book, and a calm voice. The injured man receives reassurance that resting is not laziness when the body cannot safely work. Agnes receives a blessing and another warning to finish a drink. The healer approves. Care becomes a shared effort involving cooks, servants, clergy, relatives, and experienced hands. The castle does not possess a physician trained at a great school. Such practitioners existed, particularly around royal, ecclesiastical, and wealthy urban circles. But many communities relied upon local healers, midwives, barber surgeons, clergy, household experts, or knowledgeable relatives, who provided treatment depended upon wealth and location. It also depended upon availability. A university-trained physician is little help if snow blocks every road. The healer's box contains bandages, dried herbs, a small knife, thread, needles, wooden splints, and several containers whose contents you cannot identify. One pouch holds powdered willow bark, another contains dried lavender. A folded scrap of parchment carries several written instructions, though she appears to rely more upon memory than text. One unusual preparation involves a mixture of onion, wine, and animal fat applied to certain skin complaints. The smell alone might discourage both patient and illness, although its actual effectiveness would vary considerably. The healer laughs when a child asks whether it cures everything. She says nothing cures everything. This may be the wisest medical statement in the castle. Later, you accompany her into a smaller chamber where a kitchen worker has burned 2 fingers against an iron pot. The injury is minor. It still receives attention. The healer cools the skin with clean water, then applies a soothing salve before wrapping the fingers loosely. The worker apologizes for leaving the kitchen. The healer tells him to return only when he can hold a spoon safely. Burns are common where open flames dominate daily work. Kitchens, forges, braziers, lamps, and hearths create constant hazards, especially in crowded rooms filled with tired people. Fire gives warmth. It also leaves reminders. Another patient waits near the doorway. A stable boy has developed a painful blister after walking in wet boots. The skin is broken, making infection possible. The healer washes the area and changes his footwear. Dry socks would be helpful. He owns none that remain dry. A servant brings strips of clean linen to wrap around his feet until his wool stockings can be aired. Small injuries receive respect because small injuries can become serious. A damaged foot prevents work. A festering wound may bring fever. A fever may end a life. Nobody needs written statistics to understand this. Memory teaches enough. Researchers continue interpreting how ordinary people balance learned medicine, local remedies, religious practice, and household experience during the early 12th century. Formal medical texts survive more often than spoken knowledge, leaving much daily treatment hidden from direct view. The silence of the records does not mean the knowledge was absent. It means countless remedies lived in memory. They passed from mother to daughter, healer to apprentice, cook to servant, and shepherd to child. By evening, the injured villager rests with his ankle raised upon folded cloth. Agnes sleeps near the hearth after finishing her herbal drink. The burned fingers remain wrapped. The stable boy's feet are dry. No dramatic cure has occurred. That is not how most healing works. Care consists of watching, cleaning, warming, feeding, waiting. The blizzard has begun thickening again beyond the walls. Snow brushes the shutters with a soft, persistent sound while the fire burns low and steady. You sit near the two patients. Agnes breathes more easily now. The old villager opens his eyes and asks whether his chickens arrived safely. Someone assures him they did. One of them is currently terrorizing the kitchen yard. He smiles. Pain remains. Fear has softened. Inside this frozen castle, medicine offers no promise of certainty. It offers attention, accumulated experience, useful herbs, careful hands, shared warmth, and the stubborn belief that bodies may recover when given enough help. For tonight, that is enough. By the time darkness settles over the castle, the storm has closed the world outside once again. Snow brushes the shutters in soft bursts. The wind is quieter than before, yet the cold remains firm within every stone passage. After supper, people draw toward the great hall fire with the instinctive patience of those who know evening offers few other places to go. Work does not stop completely. It simply becomes gentler. A woman repairs a torn sleeve beside the hearth. Two men shape wooden pegs with small knives. The steward studies a wax tablet while pretending not to listen to a nearby conversation about the escaped chicken. The bird has survived. Its reputation has grown. Someone claims it crossed the courtyard faster than a hunting dog. Another insists it deliberately chose the kitchen because it understood where grain was stored. No one believes this. Everyone enjoys the story. You settle upon a bench near the central fire. The heat reaches one side of your body while the other remains cool, so you turn occasionally like bread near an oven. Around you, the hall glows with candlelight and shifting shadows. This is the hour for stories, before widespread printed books. Entertainment often lived in voices. Tales moved from household to household through travellers, servants, clergy, musicians, soldiers, and merchants. Each teller altered something. A place changed. A villain grew worse. A clever servant became cleverer. Memory shaped every performance. An elderly retainer begins first. His name is Oswin, and his beard seems older than several children combined. He has served the household for decades, though the details of his youth change according to the audience. Tonight, he tells of a night lost in a frozen forest. The knight hears bells beneath the snow and follows them toward a ruined chapel. Inside waits an old woman who offers him bread, warmth, and a warning never to refuse shelter to strangers. The children listen closely. Adults pretend to work. You recognize the lesson immediately. The three villagers admitted earlier are sleeping safely near the hall. Stories do not merely entertain, they explain behaviour. Oswin's voice slows whenever the knight approaches danger. He pauses before revealing what waits behind each door, allowing the crackle of the hearth to fill the silence. The effect is simple. It works perfectly. A child whispers that the old woman must be a saint. Another insists she is a witch. Oswin says she might be both. The priest raises one eyebrow. Oswin corrects himself. She is probably not a witch. Gentle laughter passes through the hall. Medieval storytelling drew freely from scripture, local legend, heroic poetry, saints' lives, family memory, and older traditions whose origins were already obscure. A tale might contain Christian teaching alongside speaking animals, enchanted forests, giants, or mysterious strangers. Listeners did not always separate these elements as modern categories. Wonder could serve belief. Humour could carry instruction. A travelling musician staying at the castle has brought a small harp. Its wooden frame is dark with age, and several strings have been repaired with visible knots. He sits near the fire and begins tuning carefully. The first notes are thin, then warmer. Conversation fades as the melody gathers. Music changes the room. The hall no longer feels crowded. Smoke no longer seems quite so heavy. Even the wind beyond the shutters appears to fall into rhythm. The musician sings of a lord returning home across winter roads. His voice is not powerful, it is clear. The song follows a familiar pattern of departure, hardship, loyalty, and return. Several listeners know parts of it and quietly join the refrain. You do not know the words, you understand the feeling. Songs could preserve news, ancestry, praise, complaint, and memory. They also changed as they travelled, making exact original versions nearly impossible to recover. A melody heard in one region might reappear elsewhere with different names and events. The song survives because people reshape it. This one ends with the traveller reaching home just before sunrise. The children approve. The guards seem to approve more quietly. One lesser-known form of castle amusement involved riddling. Short verbal puzzles appeared in religious texts, learned collections, and ordinary conversation, often blending practical objects with playful language. Oswin announces that everyone must now answer one. He asks what has a mouth but never eats, runs but never walks, and can disappear beneath winter. Several hands rise. A river. The answer comes quickly. He tries another, what grows shorter while giving light a candle. Even the youngest child knows this. Oswin looks offended by their competence. He offers a harder puzzle involving keys without locks. A clerk answers correctly. The children accuse him of prior knowledge. He denies everything. Soon the entire hall participates. A kitchen servant creates a riddle about onions. A page offers one about a horse, though his clues accidentally describe a table again. The steward remembers yesterday's argument and begins laughing before anyone answers. Play moves easily across ranks when the rules are harmless. For a short while, a servant may outwit a noble child. A guard may fail where a cook succeeds. Nobody forgets the social order. They simply allow it to loosen around the edges. The musician begins another tune, this one quicker. Several young people clap the rhythm against their knees. There is not enough clear floor for formal dancing, but two children attempt it anyway. They turn in a small circle. One steps upon the other's shoe. Both collapse into laughter. An older woman sings a verse that the musician does not know. He follows her melody after several notes, adjusting without embarrassment. This is how traditions survive, not through perfect preservation, through participation. Near the fire, the injured villager listens from his pallet. His ankle remains raised, and the swelling has not worsened. Agnes sits beside him beneath two blankets. Her cough continues, though less often. The healer watches both while pretending to focus upon her spinning. Stories provide medicine of another kind. They distract from pain. They give waiting a shape. They remind listeners that danger can end, roads can reopen, and lost travellers can return. The priest eventually offers a tale of St. Christopher carrying a child across a dangerous river. His version is brief and solemn, though one child interrupts to ask why the saint did not simply use a bridge. The priest pauses. He says there was no bridge. The child asks why nobody built one. Several adults hide smiles. Questions survive every age. Written collections from medieval Europe preserve many saints' tales, romances, and moral narratives. Yet spoken versions must have been far more varied. Performance depended upon audience, language, memory, and occasion. The exact sound of an ordinary winter evening has vanished. You can still sense its structure: a room, a fire, a voice, a circle of listeners. The wind rises outside for several moments, pressing snow against the shutters. Osin waits until it fades before beginning another story. This time, he tells of a wolf that enters a village disguised as a monk. The priest raises both eyebrows. Oswin promises the monk is not the problem. The wolf, apparently, has poor table manners. The story becomes increasingly ridiculous. The wolf blesses a loaf backward, steals a cheese, and hides beneath a bed where a goose discovers him. At the mention of the goose, everyone looks toward the kitchen doorway. The castle geese are absent. Their influence remains. By the end, the false monk flees into the forest pursued by poultry, children, and one angry baker. The hall erupts in laughter. Even the lord, seated near the high table, smiles openly. A story does not need to be true to reveal something useful. This one says greed exposes itself. It also says geese are terrifying. Both lessons seem reasonable. Later, the laughter softens. The musician plays a slower melody while servants lower lamps and bank the outer fires. The tune contains no words, only a gentle sequence that rises and settles like breathing. People begin preparing for sleep. Blankets unfold, benches shift. Children resist closing their eyes, afraid the stories will continue without them. One girl asks whether the knight from the frozen forest ever returned to the old chapel. Oswin says he did. Every winter. He brought bread each time. The answer satisfies her. You lie upon your pallet near the wall. Smoke hangs faintly above the hall, and firelight moves across the carved fox at the end of the bench. Its tiny crown casts a strange shadow against the floor. Outside, the blizzard continues. Inside, memory passes from one voice to another. Songs carry courage. Riddles sharpen tired minds. Legends make cold nights shorter. Nobody writes down what was said. By morning, some details will already change. The wolf may become a bear. The goose may become 3 geese. The knight may cross a mountain instead of a forest. The truth inside the story will remain when darkness gathers and the world beyond the walls disappears. People survive partly by telling one another that winter has been endured before. The last harp note fades. Someone adds a final log to the hearth. Then the hall grows quiet, holding every tale within its smoke-darkened beams until another evening asks for them again. The stories from the previous night still linger in conversation when the steward receives troubling news. One of the grain barrels is lighter than expected. Not empty, not spoiled, simply lower than the count recorded several days earlier. The difference may be small, but winter makes small differences important. You follow the steward down into the storeroom where the cool air smells of oats, timber, salt, and damp stone. A clerk carries a wax tablet while 2 servants wait beside the opened barrel. The grain inside appears clean. No water has entered. No obvious insects move across the surface. The problem is quantity. The steward asks when the barrel was last opened. One servant answers immediately. Another hesitates. The kitchen drew more oats than usual after the villagers arrived, and several additional bowls were prepared for guards working longer shifts on the walls. No one has stolen anything. The household has simply consumed more than planned. That explanation brings relief. It does not restore the grain. The steward presses a new figure into the wax tablet and studies the remaining stores with a silence that makes everyone stand straighter. The storm has lasted longer than expected. Roads remain hidden. The nearest mill cannot be reached. Several tenants who usually deliver provisions have not appeared, and no one knows whether their homes, carts, animals, or courage have failed them. The castle is not starving. It is becoming careful. By midday, word spreads that portions will be adjusted. Bread loaves become slightly smaller. Porridge receives more water. Meat appears less often, while peas, beans, onions, and barley take larger roles in the cooking pots. Nobody calls this hunger. Not yet, still. Every person notices, at supper, you receive a bowl of thick pea broth and a modest piece of dark bread. Yesterday's portion would have been larger. The food remains warm and satisfying. That matters. The cook has added herbs, onions, and a little salted pork for flavour. She understands that morale can weaken even before bodies do. A meal that smells generous may feel generous. The kitchen has become skilled at persuasion. A practical feature of medieval household management was the careful adjustment of diet, according to season and supply. Grain-based dishes could stretch limited meat, while pottages combined vegetables, legumes, herbs, and whatever preserved ingredients remained available. Such meals were not merely emergency food, they formed part of ordinary life. What changes now is the balance. More broth, less meat, thinner ale, smaller bread. The Lord's household also receives reduced portions, though the high table still eats better than most of the hall. Rank does not vanish when supplies tighten, it becomes more visible. A platter of roasted poultry reaches the raised table while servants below eat pottage. Several people glance upward, then return to their bowls. No open complaint follows. The Lord notices anyway. He speaks quietly with the steward, then sends part of the poultry toward the injured villagers and Agnes near the hearth. The gesture is modest. Its meaning travels through the room. Generosity in a castle is never entirely private. People watch. They remember. A ruler who shares during shortage strengthens loyalty. A ruler who hoards may preserve food while losing something harder to replace. The balance between display and duty remains delicate. Researchers interpreting household accounts often find clear evidence of unequal diets, yet the records rarely capture every informal gift, shared dish, or private decision. Numbers reveal distribution, but not always the emotions surrounding it. Tonight, the room understands the message. The Lord has not ended hierarchy. He has acknowledged hardship. Later. The steward inspects the cheese shelves again. Several wheels remain sound. One has developed a soft patch along its edge. The damaged section is cut away immediately, leaving the rest for cooking. A servant suggests discarding the wheel. The cook looks at him as though he has proposed burning the chapel. The cheese is carried upstairs. It will melt into tomorrow's pottage. Waste has become nearly offensive. Kitchen scraps go into stock. Stale bread thickens soup. Bones return to the pot until they surrender every trace of flavour. Vegetable peelings feed animals when safe. Ash cleans vessels. Fat becomes fuel, cooking material, salve base, or tallow. Even cracked bowls remain useful until they can no longer hold anything. The castle begins consuming its margins. A rarely noticed winter practice involved combining foods of different quality, so nothing useful disappeared. Coarse flour might mix with finer grain. Old bread might soften in broth. Small beer could be strengthened with spices, while sharp cheese found new life in cooked dishes. Skill hides scarcity. By afternoon, the villagers sheltering inside the castle offer part of their own grain sack to the steward. It is not much. The sack survived their damaged roof because the old man insisted upon carrying it out before anything else. Now he lies near the hearth with his ankle wrapped and elevated. He tells the steward the grain should feed everyone. The steward refuses at first. The old man refuses the refusal. Their quiet argument attracts attention. At last, they agree that half will enter the castle stores while half remains reserved for the villagers' return home. Neither side looks entirely satisfied. That means the compromise is probably fair. You think of the roof waiting beyond the gates. Snow may have entered their cottage. The remaining grain may be damp. Their chickens are safe, though one continues treating the kitchen yard as conquered territory. The future remains uncertain. Sharing still happens. Not every act of generosity is noble in the ceremonial sense. A kitchen servant slips an extra crust to a stable boy whose feet are still bandaged. An older woman gives half her cheese to a child who claims not to be hungry. A guard returning from the wall leaves part of his ale beside Agnes without saying anything. These gifts are small enough to escape accounting. Together, they reshape the atmosphere of shortage, yet kindness has limits. The steward orders storeroom doors locked between distributions. Only assigned servants may enter. The rule is not an accusation, it is prevention. Hunger can change behaviour before anyone recognises the change in themselves. Food kept under supervision reduces temptation and suspicion alike. A missing loaf can create more unrest than its value suggests. The castle must preserve trust as carefully as grain. That evening, the clerk reads a revised quantities aloud to the steward. Oats remain sufficient for several weeks if portions stay reduced. Barley is stronger. Salted meat is secure. Though consumption must slow, onions are plentiful. Cheese requires closer inspection. Ale production may continue, provided grain is not diverted excessively. Every conclusion includes conditions. The storm decides whether those conditions remain manageable. No complete agreement exists among specialists about how accurately smaller noble households predicted winter consumption in the early 12th century. Some estates maintained experienced officers and detailed customary knowledge, while others likely relied upon rougher estimates and local memory. Weather could defeat both. A blizzard does not consult the inventory. You climb toward the battlements near sunset. The guards have cleared enough snow to watch the valley again. The sky remains white, but the snowfall has weakened. No carts appear. No riders approach. The road remains invisible. Smoke rises from one distant cluster of cottages, thin but steady. That small sign brings relief. Someone is tending a fire. Someone has survived another day. Back inside. The kitchen prepares a dish designed to stretch the remaining supplies without making deprivation feel severe. Barley simmers with onions, dried peas, herbs, and fragments of bacon. A small amount of cheese melts into the broth, giving it richness beyond its quantity. The cook tastes it. Then she adds water. The flavour weakens slightly. She adds sage and garlic. The flavour returns. This is not deception. It is craft. When the bowls arrive, steam rises through the hall. People eat slowly, perhaps because the portions are smaller, perhaps because warmth deserves attention. Conversation remains subdued. Nobody is starving, everyone is calculating. The children finish first and watch the serving pot with hopeful expressions. One page begins scraping his bowl so thoroughly that the sound attracts the cook. She gives him half a ladle more. He smiles. The next child immediately begins scraping. The cook points toward him without speaking. He stops. Scarcity sharpens strategy at every age. After supper, the Lord addresses the hall briefly. He says the stores remain adequate. He says the store must be respected. He asks everyone to follow the steward's portions and report spoilage, waste, or need without shame. His voice remains calm. That calm matters more than grandeur. Panic consumes faster than hunger. The hall settles for the night beneath a quieter mood. Fires are banked carefully, blankets shared, and tomorrow's bread measured before the kitchen closes. You lie near the hearth and listen to the soft movement of sleepers. The castle still possesses food. It still possesses warmth. More importantly, it still possesses cooperation. Outside, snow covers the road that must eventually bring carts, grain, salt, news, and relief. Inside, every loaf has become visible. Every bowl has become deliberate. Every gift has become memorable. Winter has begun asking the hardest question of the fortress, not whether its walls are strong, whether the people within them can remain generous when there is less to share. The first sign of change arrives as a sound. Water drips somewhere beyond the hall. At first, you mistake it for snow slipping through a damaged roof. Then another drop follows, and another, each landing with a soft tap upon stone. By dawn, the rhythm has become steady. The temperature has risen, not much, enough. You step into the courtyard and discover that the snow has changed texture overnight. Its surface no longer looks dry and powdery. A darker crust has formed where warmth from walls, roofs, animals, and human movement reaches it. Along the kitchen eaves, tiny icicles begin to shine. One releases a drop. It hangs briefly in the pale morning light before falling. The castle listens. People have spent so many days watching snow deepen that even a little melting feels significant. Servants pause beneath the covered passage. Stable workers look toward the roofs. Guards on the wall study the valley with renewed concentration. Nobody celebrates yet. Winter enjoys false promises. A mild afternoon may be followed by another violent freeze. Melting snow can become ice by nightfall, turning stairs and paths more dangerous than before. Still, the change cannot be ignored. The sky has lifted slightly. Clouds remain thick, but they no longer press so heavily upon the towers. A weak brightness spreads across the battlements, revealing shapes in the valley that had disappeared during the storm. A hedgerow emerges first, then the dark line of a distant wood. The road remains buried, though shallow depressions begin revealing where carts once passed. You climb toward the eastern wall. The wind has lost its sharpest edge, and breathing feels easier. Snow still covers the landscape from the ridge to river, yet the world no longer appears completely erased. A guard points toward a thin column of smoke near the cottages. Another rises farther west, then a third. These signs reassure everyone more effectively than speeches. Fires still burn, homes remain occupied, some roofs have survived. The captain sends a message to the steward, who immediately begins preparing for renewed contact beyond the gate. Preparation does not mean opening the castle. Not yet. First, the walls must be inspected. The mason and carpenter begin at the gatehouse, examining hinges, beams, roof supports, and exposed sections of stone. Snow has pressed against lower walls for days, while moisture has entered small cracks. The mason taps one joint with the handle of his tool. A little mortar falls away. He marks the spot for repair once conditions become dry enough. The carpenter checks the drawbridge timbers and finds one plank swollen but sound. A metal fitting needs tightening, though the blacksmith can manage that before afternoon. Every structure has endured strain. The castle has not escaped unharmed. It has endured. A useful truth about medieval fortifications is that weather often caused more frequent damage than warfare. Rain, frost, wind, rot, insects, and ordinary wear worked constantly against walls and timber. Sieges were memorable. Maintenance was relentless. You walk beside several servants clearing drainage channels around the courtyard. Meltwater already gathers beneath the snow, invisible until a boot suddenly sinks into cold slush. One worker discovers this personally. His foot breaks through the crust and disappears almost to the ankle. He pulls it free with a wet, sucking sound, then stands perfectly still while everyone nearby tries not to laugh. He looks at his soaked boot. The cook, passing with a basket, tells him the spring has clearly chosen him first. Laughter follows. Even the worker joins after a moment. The channels must remain open. If water cannot escape, it collects against foundations, freezes overnight, and damages stone or timber. Servants use shovels, boards, and iron tools to cut paths through the snow. Dark water begins moving slowly toward the outer ditch. Its sound seems strangely lively. Inside the stable, the animals notice change as well. Horses lift their heads toward the open door. Chickens become more active beneath their shelter. The geese march into the courtyard and inspect the meltwater as though they personally arranged it. The sickly mule eats with better appetite. The stable boy reports this proudly to anyone willing to listen. Soon, 2 horses are led outside for longer exercise. Their hooves break through the softened snow, leaving deep prints behind them. Steam rises from their bodies as they move beneath the covered walkway. The grey mare tosses her head. She seems impatient with the entire season. The groom shares her opinion. In the great hall, the steward reviews supplies once more. The reduced portions have worked. Grain remains lower than anyone prefers, but the situation is stable. Cheese stores have improved after damaged sections were used quickly. Salted meat can last if consumption remains careful. The question now is access. Can carts reach the castle? Can people travel safely? Can the mill begin working again? No answer comes immediately. A scouting party prepares near the gate. 4 men will travel only as far as the nearest cluster of cottages. They carry staffs, ropes, short spears, blankets, and a little food. Their task is not heroic. It is practical. They must test the road, check nearby households, and discover whether any path toward the mill remains usable. The injured villager watches them from beside the hearth. His ankle has improved, though the healer still refuses to let him walk without support. He gives detailed directions about a drainage ditch hidden beneath the snow. One scout listens carefully. Local knowledge may prevent a broken leg before the gate opens. The priest offers a brief blessing. The captain checks each man's clothing. The steward repeats that they must return before darkness. Then the great wooden bar lifts. Cold air enters the passage, but it no longer feels murderous. The doors open slowly. Beyond them, the world appears vast and almost painfully bright. The scouts step across the drawbridge. Their boots sink into snow immediately. One man tests the ground with his staff before every step. Another carries rope looped across his shoulder, in case someone falls through concealed ice or into a drift. The gates remain open just long enough for them to leave. Then they close again. Waiting begins. The entire castle seems aware of their absence. Work continues, though eyes turn repeatedly toward the walls. The carpenter repairs shutters. The cook prepares broth. Children resume lessons. Still, everyone listens for the horn. Around midday, the sun appears, only briefly. A pale disk becomes visible behind thin cloud, turning icicles silver and placing faint shadows across the courtyard. Several children run outside before servants can stop them. They lift their faces toward the light. The warmth is barely noticeable. It feels wonderful. One child declares that winter is ending. An older servant tells him not to insult winter while it can still hear. The child lowers his voice. Small changes gather through the afternoon. Snow slides from a stable roof with a long, whispering rush. Water runs from the mouth of a stone drain. A patch of dark earth appears beside the kitchen wall where heat has escaped for days. The castle dog investigates the patch thoroughly. Finding nothing edible, he lies upon it anyway. Beneath one sheltered ledge, a few flattened green leaves emerge from the snow. They belong to a hardy herb planted near the kitchen garden. The cook kneels to inspect them. The leaves are bruised but alive. She touches one gently, then stands without picking it. There are too few to waste. Medieval households depended upon close observation of seasonal signs. People watched birds, soil, rivers, budding plants, cloud patterns, animal behavior, and the changing length of daylight. These observations helped guide planting, travel, repairs, and food use. Some conclusions were practical. Others blended experience with folklore. A raven calling from one direction might predict weather for one listener and mean nothing to another. The surviving traditions do not form one consistent system. They reveal how carefully people watched the natural world. Late in the afternoon, a horn sounds from the gatehouse, once, then twice. The scouts are returning. You hurry toward the wall with everyone else. 4 dark figures move along the half-buried road. They travel slowly, accompanied by 2 villagers carrying bundles. The gate opens. Snow and voices enter together. The scouts bring mixed news. The nearest cottages have survived, though one roof requires urgent repair. Several families are short of firewood. A child has fever, but remains awake and drinking. The road toward the mill is blocked by deep drifts near the stream. Travel may become possible within days if the thaw continues. The mill itself appears undamaged from a distance. This is enough to lift the hall's mood. Not certainty, possibility. The two villagers carry eggs, a small sack of dried beans, and news from neighbouring homes in exchange. The castle sends rope, timber pegs, a pot of broth, and 2 workers to help secure the damaged roof tomorrow. Exchange begins before roads fully reopen. The fortress and countryside breathe toward one another again at supper. Portions remain modest, but the atmosphere has changed. People speak about repairs, paths, animals, and the first journeys they will make once travel becomes safer. The children ask when they may play beyond the walls. The answer is not soon. They ask again anyway, near the hearth. Agnes sits upright without coughing for several minutes. The old villager tests his wrapped ankle under the healer's supervision. The mule finishes its entire ration. Each recovery feels connected. Night returns, but darkness no longer seems endless. Water continues dripping from the eaves. The sound reaches you as you settle near the hall fire, gentle and irregular. Drop by drop, the castle loosens from winter's grip. The blizzard has not disappeared from memory. Snow still surrounds the walls. Supplies remain limited. Another freeze may come, yet the horizon has returned. Roads exist beneath the white surface. Smoke rises from neighbouring homes, somewhere beyond the valley. A mill waits beside frozen water, ready to turn again when the thaw finally reaches it. The castle is no longer sealed away. It is preparing to rejoin the world. By morning, the dripping from the eaves has become a steady chorus. Water runs along stone gutters, slips from roof edges, and gathers in shallow channels across the courtyard. Snow still covers most of the ground, but patches of earth have appeared near warm walls and busy doorways. The castle looks different, not transformed, released. You step outside beneath a sky washed pale blue after days of cloud. Sunlight rests upon the towers, revealing every crack, stain, and uneven stone that the storm had hidden. The brightness feels almost startling. People narrow their eyes as they work. Servants carry damaged blankets into the open air. Stable hands lead horses through the courtyard. The carpenter examines warped boards, while the mason marks loose mortar for later repair. Winter has left a list. Every roof must be checked. Every storehouse must be inspected. Every path must be reopened. The gatehouse becomes the centre of activity. Guards shovel softened snow from the entrance while workers clear the drawbridge 1 plank at a time. The timber feels slick beneath your boots. Below, the defensive ditch holds dirty snow, broken branches, and pools of dark melt water. Nothing about it resembles the clean white landscape of several days earlier. Thawing reveals everything winter covered: mud, dung, lost tools. Discarded straw. 1 missing wooden peg appears near the wall where a guard abandoned his search. The younger man who dropped it lifts the peg triumphantly. The older guard asks whether he plans to compose a song about its recovery. He considers this. Perhaps he does. The great doors remain closed until the captain completes his inspection. Hinges are tightened. The wooden bar is checked for splitting. Snow is cleared from the road immediately beyond the bridge. Then the order comes. The gates open. Light enters the passage first. Fresh air follows, carrying the scent of wet soil, thawing wood, distant smoke and cold water moving beneath ice. The road beyond is still difficult. Deep drifts remain along the edges, while the centre has become a brown mixture of snow and mud. Yet it is visible again, winding down the ridge toward fields and cottages. You cross the bridge slowly. For the first time since your arrival, the castle stands behind you with its gates open. From outside, the walls appear immense. They rise from the snow-darkened earth, crowned with towers and timber roofs. Smoke drifts from several openings, bending gently in the lighter wind. The fortress looks powerful. Now you understand its power differently. Its strength does not come from stone alone. Stone cannot prepare bread. Stone cannot comfort a frightened horse. Stone cannot carry firewood before sunrise. mend a cloak by candlelight, or share a meal when portions grow small. The castle survived because people made it live. You walk down the road with a small group sent to inspect the surrounding land. The snow reaches your ankles in places, then suddenly sinks deeper where the wind formed hidden drifts. Every step requires attention. The scouts lead carefully, beside the road. Hedges emerge in broken lines. Their branches lie bent beneath melting snow, though tiny buds remain closed and unharmed. A raven watches from a fence post. Farther down the hill, the first cottage comes into view. Its thatched roof has sagged along one side, but timber braces now support the damaged section. 2 castle workers help the family lift fresh poles into place. The villagers wave as you approach. Their faces appear tired. They also appear relieved. Smoke rises from the cottage opening. A small child stands wrapped in wool near the doorway, watching every movement with solemn interest. This may be the child who suffered fever. Today, the child is standing. That is enough good news for one morning. The castle servants unload rope, pegs, and a basket of bread. In return, the household offers eggs and information about the road toward the mill. Exchange resumes naturally. No market bell sounds. No official ceremony begins. People simply start helping one another recover. Medieval castles existed within networks of villages, fields, mills, woodlands, roads, churches, and estates. Their residents depended upon the surrounding countryside for grain, labour, livestock, timber, and information. The countryside also depended upon the castle for protection, authority, employment, storage, and emergency assistance. Neither world stood alone. The blizzard made that dependence impossible to ignore. You continue toward the damaged stream crossing. Water moves beneath the fractured sheet of ice, producing a low rushing sound. The banks remain buried, and one section of the road has collapsed into slush. Carts cannot pass yet. People on foot can cross using a narrow timber plank. The scouts test it before anyone steps forward. One man crosses safely, then another. The plank bends slightly beneath your weight, and cold water flashes below through gaps in the ice. You move slowly. On the other side, the road rises toward the mill. Its roof appears above the trees. The wheel remains still, locked by ice and debris, but the structure has survived. Workers are already clearing branches from the channel. The miller stands nearby wearing a cloak patched at both elbows. He reports that the wheel may turn again within 2 days, perhaps 3. Nobody asks him to promise. Weather dislikes promises. The mill matters because stored grain cannot become useful bread until it is ground. Hand mills may handle small quantities, but a watermill serves the wider estate far more efficiently. Its return will ease pressure across every household nearby. You watch workers remove ice from the wooden paddles. They use poles, axes, and patience. A fragment breaks free and floats downstream. The wheel shifts slightly, only an inch. Everyone notices. The miller smiles. Renewal often begins with very small movements. On the journey back, you pass fields hidden beneath wet snow. Their boundaries gradually reappear as hedges and low banks emerge. No crops grow yet. Still, people already discuss spring. Which field should be ploughed first? How much seed grain remains? Will the ground stay waterlogged? Did sheep survive in the distant fold? The future returns through practical questions. Inside the castle, activity has spread everywhere. Blankets hang from ropes across the courtyard. Wooden bowls dry in the sunlight. Rushes from the great hall are carried outside for replacement. The smell is powerful. Fresh air improves it slowly. The injured villager sits near the gate with a staff beside him. The healer finally allows him to stand for several moments under supervision. He places weight upon the wrapped ankle. Pain remains. The joint holds. His companions plan to return home tomorrow if the road stays firm. Their chickens will travel with them. This announcement disappoints the kitchen yard. The escaped hen has become a local figure of authority. Agnes also improves. She sits beside an open shutter. breathing the cleaner air while sunlight touches her blankets. Her cough has not vanished, but strength has returned to her face. The stable boy's blister is healing. The mule has resumed its suspicious personality. Recovery appears everywhere, not complete. Enough. At midday, the Lord stands near the open gate speaking with the steward, captain, priest, and several villagers. Decisions concern road repairs, grain distribution, roof damage, and assistance for isolated cottages. Leadership shifts from surviving the storm to managing its aftermath. The transition happens quickly. Emergency rarely ends with the weather. It leaves repairs, debts, injuries, shortages, and stories. Some details of this blizzard may enter household memory for generations. Children will remember the crowned fox, the escaped chicken, the travellers appearing through snow, and the night portions became smaller. Adults will remember quantities. How many grain barrels remained, how many roofs failed, how long the road stayed closed. No written chronicle may preserve any of it. Most medieval lives pass beyond formal record. Yet ordinary endurance shaped history as surely as battles and royal marriages. You turn toward the keep one final time. Sunlight warms the upper stones while meltwater runs beneath the walls. Smoke rises from the hall where another meal is being prepared. The castle no longer feels like a distant monument. It feels inhabited. You remember the servants waking before dawn, the guards staring into whiteness, the cooks stretching grain, and the children turning wood scraps into kingdoms. You remember the healer's steady hands, the musician's harp, the mule's recovery, the lord sharing poultry from the high table. Every detail belongs to the same survival. Now the day softens. The road lies open beneath your feet, though snow remains along the hedges. Water murmurs through ditches, carrying small pieces of ice toward the valley. You walk away slowly. Behind you, the castle grows quieter with distance. Its towers remain visible above the ridge, pale against the clearing sky. The people inside continue working. A firekeeper adds another log. A cook stirs barley. A child checks whether the wooden fox still wears its crown. A guard watches the road. Though now he watches travellers returning rather than vanishing. The storm has ended. The season has not. More frost may come. Another snowfall may cover the fields before spring arrives. Still, something has changed. The castle has remembered how to open. You breathe in the cold, clean air. The scent of smoke fades behind you. Your footsteps press into softened snow, then fill slowly with clear water. Each print remains for a moment before losing its edges. The landscape grows still again, not empty. Resting. You imagine evening returning to the fortress. Candles will glow behind narrow windows. Blankets will be drawn close. Voices will soften beside the hearth. Perhaps Oswin will tell the story of the great blizzard. Perhaps the chicken will become a heroic bird that guided lost travellers through the storm. Perhaps the crowned fox will command an army after all. Memory will warm what fire cannot reach. And now, as the road stretches quietly through the valley, you may let the castle recede into the gentle distance. The walls become smaller, the towers fade into the pale horizon. Water continues beneath the ice with a soft and patient voice. Your breathing slows, your shoulders settle. There is nothing more to carry tonight. The grain is counted, the animals are fed, the gates are secure, the fires remain alive. Inside the hall, sleepers gather beneath wool while the last light rests upon smoke-darkened beams. The dog curls beneath his familiar bench. The cat watches the storeroom door. A final candle trembles beside the chapel altar. Outside, the melting snow reflects the moon. The castle stands peacefully above the valley, no longer fighting the storm, simply holding the warmth that remains. You can leave it there, stone beneath stars, smoke above roofs, quiet voices fading beside the fire. The winter world grows softer, then softer still. Sleep well,